We all have a story to tell. Beautiful, complex, fascinating stories. Told through a lens of varying shades and experiences. That's the power of representation. Diverse creatives cannot be defined or confined. So let your creativity soar. Fill the page, press record, and dare to captivate the masses with your authentic voice. We all have a story to tell. What's yours? Hollywood Creative Forum, where every story is told.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the host of the 2021 Hollywood Creative Forum, TV host and producer, Dana Blair.
Hello, everyone. I'm back. And welcome to the 2021 Hollywood Creative Forum. I'm Dana Blair, and still excited to be here for even more action on day 2. For those of you that are new and missed day 1, how dare you? But the Hollywood Creative Forum is an annual professional development and networking event produced by the Walter Cates Foundation. This space, in real life and virtually, is an authentic, transparent, empowering, and inspirational platform. Yesterday, we heard from some phenomenal speakers and panelists, dropping gems on everything from writing your breakthrough script to understanding the Native American voice in entertainment, plus experience the forum's inaugural screening of Stateless, a documentary by award-winning director Michelle Stevenson. Today, we will dive even deeper into the power of authentic storytelling with CEO of Revolt Media and TV, Datavio Samuels. The one and only DMA will join us again to go even further into understanding the creative elements of a great pitch in an organic and meaningful way. DMA will also be joined by some phenomenal executives and industry experts in the television and film space. Plus, as the new distribution landscape intersects with an ever-expanding global marketplace, producers and executives alike will provide new market insights via our global Greenlight panel. We will pull back the curtain on the writer's room with Director CBS Diversity Writers Mentoring Program and Director of WGA Showrunner Training Program, Carol Kirshner. And we will wrap up the day with a very unique networking opportunity. This is an experience you have to register for separately, and you will need to log out of this conference at the end of the day and click the networking link. Don't worry, I will definitely remind you, but it's a separate email that you should have received once you registered for today's forum. A couple of housekeeping notes. Please share your gems and favorite moments of the day via social media using hashtag HCF2021 or hashtag Hollywood Creative Forum. Plus, keep your eyes peeled for our end of day survey. This is so that we can better serve you in planning future events. And drum roll, please, big announcement. We will return to in-person events April 2022 at the London Hotel in Los Angeles. So keep your eyes peeled for updates and future announcements, and hopefully we'll see each and every one of you there in real life next year. I've said it before, and I will say it again. I encourage each of you to take notes, write down some of the gems that will be dropped, names of participants, and connect in the chats. We are a community. Connecting consistently is a part of the work that we should do. Thank you again for logging on from your desks, offices, kitchen tables, beds, workspaces that you don't want your colleagues or friends to know about. It's all good. We're happy to have you. And now, returning for day 2, please help me give a warm welcome to Executive Director of Walter Cates Foundation, Michelle Ray.
Thank you so much, Dana, for the introduction, and of course, for being our host extraordinaire for this year's forum. As Dana has so efficiently and succinctly recapped yesterday's program, I just want to add to all of you how powerful and impactful it has been to watch the forum come to life. If you joined us yesterday, you would have known that one of the common threads that has permeated throughout all of the discussions has been that people want to tell their own stories in their own authentic voices and from their own perspectives. People want to see themselves and they want to be themselves, who they really are, and not just being portrayed historically in books or on television and in film. So what does it really mean to be ourselves? From my perspective, it is important that we show up in a way where we don't have to choose one group, one race, or any singular identifier to represent who we are or what kinds of stories are ours to tell. The conversations that are happening at this event are powerful, and they are the types of exchanges, thoughts, ideas, and experiences that will shape and shift our understanding of humanity, diversity, inclusion, identity, gender, race, and on and on and on. So far, the concept of intersectionality has come up in almost every conversation. The way that people see themselves is also changing. The awareness that no one person, no one community, ethnic group, or region of the world is a monolith. It demands that we look at each other differently as well. And the value of seeing each other differently is that it prompts us to be curious about other people so that we ask our questions before we draw conclusions. It removes the burden and weight of First Nation, Indigenous people, Black, Asian, Latinx persons with disabilities, the LGBTQ plus community, to prove that we all belong and that we deserve to occupy a space in the world. When I think about the work of the Walter Cates Foundation, I know that advocating for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is about creating opportunities and spaces for people who not only work in this industry, but who also want to be a part of it. What is becoming increasingly apparent is that the real work and the heaviest lift of creating diversity is that we must open our minds, and if I may be so bold, even our hearts, before we can fully open the doors of opportunity in a way that welcomes people of all backgrounds into an industry where they desire to be, and even more so where they are insisting to be, so that they can show up as who they really are in their real whole and complex selves. After we close out this iteration of the forum this evening, let's be sure to keep talking, to keep advocating for ourselves and for each other, and to create an even greater impact around the globe by being an industry where people can see themselves, hear their stories, and feel genuinely included and represented. We cannot do this work alone, and we look forward to your continued support of our efforts to advance this work. So, and speaking of support, I would be remiss if I did not recognize Charter Communications as the presenting sponsor of the 2021 Hollywood Creative Forum. Along with them, I'd also like to recognize the generous support of Comcast, NBC Universal, as well as A&E Networks, Cox, and ESPN. And if I can add my appreciation to the generous contributions of the Africa Channel, our friends at Aspire TV, Disney Entertainment, and Warner Media. In addition to all of those folks, we have our partners whose creativity and energy has made it all possible. And we have a whole list of those folks who have helped us as well. It's worth repeating again that Charter stepped up to be this year's presenting sponsor. And their commitment to this event is just one of the many examples of how they demonstrate their dedication to diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging across our industry. So now I would like to welcome to the stage my colleague, my ally and friend, Rhonda Critchlow. While she holds the title of SVP and Chief Diversity Officer of Charter, she represents far more than her leadership position to me. She's an advocate and a champion of the foundation and of our work. So with that, I would like to welcome Rhonda to the stage.
Thank you, Michelle. Charter Communications, a leading connectivity company known through our Spectrum brand, is proud to be the presenting sponsor of this year's Hollywood Creative Forum. We appreciate the critical importance of this year's conference theme, Stories from the Diaspora, and applaud Michelle Ray and the Walter Cates Foundation for having the foresight to bring so many diverse creators and industry leaders together for this discussion. Equally important is that this year you are reaching a broader audience than ever before. Now more than ever, we must lift up the diverse and often marginalized voices from across the U.S. and around the world so that people's stories can be heard and understood. Charter has a long and deep partnership with the Walter Cates Foundation, which includes the service of Tom Rutledge, our chairman and CEO, as treasurer of the foundation's board of directors. Our work together stems from a shared understanding of the power of diversity and inclusion in our industry. At Charter, we know that when we embrace the unique backgrounds, perspectives, and experiences of our employees, partners, and customers, we're a stronger and more competitive company. Our commitment to promoting stories from the diaspora for our customers extends through Spectrum Originals, Charter's premium content group, which was launched in 2019 under the leadership of Catherine Pope. Our goal is to offer new content that appeals to our multidimensional audiences nationwide and showcases diverse talent both in front of and behind the camera. Just last month, we released 8 episodes of a new series called Eden, shot in Australia. With a diverse cast and all-women writing team, this program brings much-needed LGBTQ representation to the mystery drama genre. We are also excited about our upcoming series, Long Slow Exhale, co-produced with BET about a women's college basketball head coach. The show was created by Pam Vesey, an African-American writer and producer, and over half the crew are people of color. We believe that in order to portray the stories of a diverse range of people, we also need to empower a diverse range of people to help tell and bring these stories to life. Through the many stories we hope to share, and that we hope our industry will share as a whole, the better we'll be able to collectively reflect the universal story of humanity. Thank you to everyone participating in this forum and to the Walter Cates Foundation for bringing us together. During these 2 days, I hope each of you makes new connections and gets the inspiration you need to help our industry continue to grow while leveraging diversity and inclusion to make us better. Enjoy the program.
Thank you so very much, Rhonda. I look forward to seeing those shows as they are shared with the rest of the world. Today's Cates Talk is shared by one of the youngest CEOs and CEOs of color in our industry, Datavio Samuels. There's an African proverb that Datavio often repeats: until the lion learns to tell his own story, the story of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. It is a proverb that underscores the theme of the forum and sets the stage for this talk. As a Black media trailblazer, Samuels will share his vision on the power of authentic storytelling from those inside the culture and what it takes to bolster content that addresses important topics such as socioeconomic discrimination and identity intersectionality. Everyone, please help me welcome our Day 2 Cates Talk, Datavio Samuels.
Thank you, Dana. What a kind and wonderful introduction. Let me tell you what an honor it is to be here with you at the Hollywood Creative Forum, joined by creators and storytellers from all across the globe. Today, I have a presentation that I've appropriately titled for you called The Lens of the Lion. While that idea might seem a bit amorphous now, let me not bury the lead. Ultimately, this is a conversation around how important it is to control our own narratives. And in doing so, it's a secret weapon to ending the war on social injustice. Let's start from the very top. So first and foremost, we are all blessed to be a part of the most powerful industry in the world. Media, you won't find another industry that is more powerful or touches more people than media. We wake up in the morning and we grab our phones. The first thing we do is we check email, text message, and social timelines. We then turn on the radio as we jump into the shower to clean ourselves. We step out of that shower, we turn on the news and watch CNN, MSNBC, or Fox to see what's going on for the day. We then go to our breakfast tables surrounded by our loved ones and we consume newspapers, magazines, and more from our social timeline. You'd be hard pressed to find an industry that has as much impact on our people as media does. And so it should be no surprise to us that many of us spend more time consuming content than we do working to earn a paycheck. It should be no surprise to us that many of us spend more time consuming media than we do playing with our loved ones and friends. And while we can talk about the power of media, we have to understand that the power of media is really fueled by one thing, which is the work that you and I do. Media is powered by storytelling. Media is simply the pipes, but the liquid, the potency to all of it exists in the work that you and I do. You see, it's storytelling that helps us make sense of the world around us. It's stories that help us understand how our behaviors and actions might play out in the real world without having to experience those things in real life. And so you can go back to the beginning of time when cavemen sat around fires and told stories of little Deontay and little Timmy who left the camp after midnight only to never return because they were eaten by Tyrannosaurus Rex. And so from there, they learned the moral of the story to be, Don't leave the camp after midnight. It's not safe with what's out there. And so media helps us understand, and story helps us understand what we value, what we believe, and what matters to us. As it relates to communities of people, the analogy that I love most is that stories are simply mirrors and windows. For the community who is the subject to the story, story becomes a mirror. It holds a mirror up to them and it shows them who they are. It validates their story and tells them that they're important. It paints a picture of what they can aspire to and what's possible. For those people who are not part of that community, it acts as a window into the soul of a people, a window to better understand who these people are, what they've accomplished, and what they can potentially accomplish in the future. Media simply mirrors and windows. The one thing that is so amazing about this moment that we are in is that Black people are powering the world's stories. Black culture is driving global culture. Across every facet of pop culture, whether you want to talk about fashion, sports, or music, Black people and Black creators are working constantly to reshape how the world works. So if you want to talk about music, we'll have a conversation around hip hop, how hip hop is the #1 most listened to music across the globe. You want to have a conversation around television and film, let's talk about how Black Panther broke records. Let's talk about how the US gathers around their TV to watch everything from Blackish to we spent the last month watching teams of Black men play in the NBA to compete to be world champions. And it's just not on the big screen. When we look at our small screens and we look into social media, every hashtag, every tweet, every GIF, every meme, so many of them are powered by Black people, Black culture, and Black stories. The power and influence of Black culture today is truly undeniable. Unfortunately, we have a problem. And that problem is that despite the perceived power that comes with all of this influence, and despite the perceived power that comes with the ability to create stories that travel around the globe, Black people have never been in a position to own and write and take care of their own stories. I would like to submit to you that that's a problem when we talk about today, when we talk about things like equity and justice, because at the end of the day, I simply believe that the social justice war is a war on imagery and storytelling. That the way the machine operates and works to keep a people oppressed is relatively simple. First, they come up with racist policies such as let's enslave Black people. They then follow those policies up with racist stories that validate and justify those policies. Black people are savages, Black people are animals, therefore they deserve to be enslaved. Black people are dangerous, Black people are murderers, therefore they deserve to be in jail. I would like to submit to you today that if storytelling got us into this mess, that storytelling is going to be the key to getting us out. But to understand how we got here, let's go back to the very beginning. The story of Gomez Eanes de Zerara. I'm sure I messed his name up, but what's not important today is not his name. What's important is his story and the role that he played in being the first one to create the negative narrative around Black people that now is attached to all of us across the Black diaspora. Gomez's job was to chronicle the life and times of Prince Henry and all of his conquests as he traveled across Europe and into Moorish country. What earns Gomez the title of the first racist is not because he's the first one to ever talk about capturing a people. People had always been captured after war. After war, there's relatively two outcomes. Your people either got destroyed or you were captured and taken as slaves. So that idea wasn't new. What makes it new is that he's the first one responsible for justifying the fact that enslaving Black people was missionary work. At the end of the day, it is Gomez who writes that it is a mission from God to help civilize and Christianize the African savages. And while there was no New York Times back then, let's suffice it to say that this was a New York Times bestseller. If the list existed back then, it would have been #1. And so this idea spreads like wildfire across all of Europe, where you have some of the best thinkers from Plato and Aristotle contemplating how is it that Black people are so inferior? Is it the climate and the sun that did it? Or was this preordained by God and a curse because they're descendants of the people of Ham? And from with this idea and with this understanding, it then gives Europeans not only the energy, but the right to go into Africa and colonize an entire continent. And so this story not only follows us into the colonization of Africa, but the story follows us as they ship African slaves over to the U.S. When the first Black people land here in 1619, our Puritan forefathers who were men of God, yes, they needed tobacco and cotton to be picked, but they also needed to do God's work, which was to civilize the uncivilized. And so you see Black people as slaves here, and it follows us into 1776, where we earn our independence. Well, everyone except Black people, because again, they are less than human. The same story and the same idea follows us into the late 1800s with the Berlin Conference that happened in 1884 and 1885. Where European leaders sat in a room and divided up the entire continent of Africa amongst themselves. Not one Black person in the room because they didn't deserve to be in the room. They didn't need to be in the room because they were less than, and colonizing them was part of God's work. And so then we should not be surprised today when we see a cop murder an unarmed Black man. We must acknowledge and realize that it is all based on an irrational fear that is based on a story that started 600 years ago. Plato said it best when he says, "Those who tell the story rule society." With Black people never being in control of their own narrative, they have never gotten a chance to rule or share rulership. I think James Baldwin might say it best when he says, "I suspect that all of these stories were designed to reassure us that no crime was committed. We made a legend out of a massacre with the Native Americans. We made a legend out of a massacre with African Americans, and we continue to make a legend out of wildness today." Look no further than Black Lives Matter protests, where today we talk about them as if they are riots and looting and violent, when 99% of them have been peaceful. And yet, and still, when we watch thousands of Americans storm our Capitol in what we believe and what we have seen to be one of the biggest attacks on American democracy in the last hundreds of years, but yet and still we'll call that a peaceful protest. We'll treat it like it's a community picnic. We'll talk about people like Ashley Babbitt as if they are patriots and mothers and fantastic people. At the end of the day, we need to get control of our stories. A quick side note for those of you in the room who are looking for inspiration and trying to identify and find new stories to be told, I ask you to only look into our history, because we've never gotten the full truth. Our history has always only been told through the lens of the oppressor, and this one-sided narrative has served one purpose: to help them rule, to help them weaponize and hide the truth. And so I submit to you today that if you look into our history, we will find blockbuster stories that will not only drive box office hits, but help change and reshape how the world thinks about us. Let's tell the story of the Tulsa Massacre, how Black people, after the end of slavery, set themselves up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, built a Black Wall Street, built a community where they were self-sufficient, where they were building millionaires, where they took care of one another. And due to white rage, which was driven by a made-up story around a Black man touching a white woman in an elevator, our white brothers and sisters then came to Tulsa and burned down the city, burned down the town, and made them start over. Let's tell the story of Lanier, Georgia, which was a very similar story, except once they destroyed the town, they dumped a lake on it so that nobody would ever know that it existed. We have to tell the stories about how we've gone from tragedy to triumph. But we should also tell the stories that celebrate the amazing impact that we've had on the world. Let's tell the story of Louisa Harris, the first and only woman to be drafted into the NBA and actually play. Let's tell the story of Mary Jane Richards, a free Black woman who infiltrated the Confederacy as a servant so that she could be close to the Confederate leaders and spread that information back to the Union so that they could always be 10 steps ahead. In our history are blockbusters. In our history is power. And it's not just about telling stories that took place on U.S. soil. You have to understand that a global problem deserves a global solution. if the ideas that Zurara created 600 years ago apply to everyone in Africa, then we have to understand that in order to combat them, we must tell all of our stories from the US to the West Indies to the UK to Africa. And so we have to tell the story of people like Mansa Musa, who was the richest man to ever live. Most people don't know that it was an African that did that. We should tell the story of Atlantis, which many people believe to be the story of Ethiopia. We only didn't call it Ethiopia because the European settlers thought it too beautiful to attach to that continent. Let's tell the story of the Zulu tribe and the Maasai tribe. Let's tell the story of the Haitian slaves who rejected the French, beat them at war, sent them back to France, which then enabled the Louisiana Purchase because the French weren't coming back. Let's tell those parts of our story. Embedded in our story is blockbusters, but embedded in our stories are amazing stories of tragedy to triumph and amazing stories of heroism that we've never, ever been able to tell. And while many today talk about representation, what I want you to see is representation is absolutely critical and representation absolutely matters. Again, media is but a window and a mirror to the world. But that said, representation is simply a symptom of the bigger issue. At the end of the day, we've been represented in their stories. We were just represented as mammies, as people who were shucking and driving, as drug dealers, gang members, pimps. We've been represented. And so we can no longer settle for just being a character in a story. We need to be funding, controlling, writing, and overseeing all of our narratives. At the end of the day, we have to win the narrative war. It is true that we have gotten policy wins. We abolished slavery back in the 1800s. They rewrote the rules as the Black Codes. We destroyed the Black Codes and they rewrote them as Jim Crow. We beat Jim Crow and they rewrote that as the war on drugs. The pattern is clear. They create a racist policy, then they create stories that justify it. If we are going to win this war, we have to win the narrative war. It is not until you win the narrative war that you get the opportunity to truly erase and change policy for good for the future. Winning this war is the key to changing the way that Black people and Black culture are perceived, respected, and valued globally. At the end of the day, it's this simple. Absolutely nothing changes until the narrative change. Transformative change starts with being in a position to tell our own stories and control our own narrative. That means ownership. That means green light power. That means the ability to control and dictate budgets. That is the secret and the key to changing the story across the African diaspora. And Revolt, where I am, is 100% committed to that mission. As we close out today, I'd like to connect the idea back to the title at the beginning. We talked about the lens of the lion. And to get there, you have to understand what has become one of my favorite African proverbs ever. And it simply goes like this. Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. It doesn't matter how powerful the lion is. It doesn't matter how strong the lion is. If the lion is not telling its own story, it will always be put in a position where it is seen and told to be less than it truly is. Our simple idea at Revolt, my simple idea for you today, is that we need to put the pen back in the hands of the lion. We need to allow the lion to control its own narrative. We need to allow the lion to be its own truth teller. We need to allow the lion to tell its own story. In doing so, I fundamentally believe that we can change things for Black people across the diaspora. And because Black people are driving so much of global culture, if you change things for Black people, you change things for the world. Thank you. All right, Dana. Whew, that was a lot. Kicking it back to you.
Thank you so very much, Shatavio. And yes, that proverb is actually one of my favorites as well. And it's so in keeping with this year's theme, Stories of the Diaspora, and the importance that we share all of those stories, the many layers and intricacies for everyone. So housekeeping notes really quickly before we keep the party going. Please be sure to continue to share with each other on social media using hashtag HCF2021 and hashtag Hollywood Creative Forum. I did announce a little bit earlier that we will be returning in real life next year, April 2022 at the London in Los Angeles. So keep your eyes peeled for that as well. We are going to take a quick break. So you can grab a line with DMA and development executives across all platforms will discuss the organic pathway to pitching and selling original live action content, both scripted and unscripted. So you don't want to miss it. So take a quick break. We'll be right back, 10:45 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 1:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we will see you here shortly. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you grab some coffee, some water. Next up, we have a panel that many of you have been highly anticipating, the Original Content Pipeline. Development executives across all platforms will discuss the organic pathway to pitching and selling original live action content, both scripted and unscripted. This insightful dialogue will include hot topics such as content mandates, assessing the marketplace, the art and creative elements of a great pitch, navigating with and without representation, and the bridge between creating content and engaging in its execution. At the conclusion of this panel, we will also have a Q&A opportunity, so get your questions ready right there below. Use the Q&A function. Now, please help me give a warm return to our virtual stage, President Planet DMA, the one and only DMA.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're so excited to start this panel with this incredible assemblage of executives and producers. But I want to start with a favor, please. We'd like to post now a very quick poll for attendees because we want to be able to assess, is the professional development, and I mean, this is some advanced conversation we're about to have, how is that going to help you learn, grow, and shift professionally? So let's post that poll, and please take a quick moment to answer 2 questions. Are you a buyer or a seller in the content marketplace? And then the right question for buyers or sellers of how you're currently moving through this industry. How are you shopping your content for myself, sourcing it, finding that content for our buyers? Stand by and take a moment to complete the poll, and we will begin the panel. We're just going to get a few more votes in here, everyone. This is incredibly helpful for us. So thank you for taking some time just to complete this for us. All right, everyone, thank you. We're closing the poll and opening this incredible panel. Starting with introductions, everyone, I'm DMA, president of Planet DMA. I have been both a creative and a talent executive, as well as a writer, producer, and showrunner in scripted and unscripted content. And that is why I'm so excited to invite you to meet some of the incredible folks joining us today. Let's let them introduce themselves, starting with Maite Cueva.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maite Cueva. I'm an executive producer at A&E Networks, currently right now, but I spent many a year at Oprah Winfrey Network working in unscripted, and I cut my teeth for many years at MTV.
Love it. Love the unscripted. That's my old world. Brett King, talk to us.
Hi, my name's Brett King. I am Vice President, Creative Programming for Diversity and Inclusion at Sony Pictures Entertainment. I am a longtime creative executive. I've been a producer, an executive. I've bought shows, sold shows, and made shows, but almost entirely in the scripted realm, not in unscripted. At Sony, I look for opportunities for inclusion as it touches the businesses of film and television.
Thanks, Brett. Lynette Ramirez.
Hi, I'm Lynette Ramirez. I am head of development currently at Bassett Vance, Angela Bassett and Courtney B. Vance's production company with the deal at Viacom CBS. I'm also a long-time executive in the business, focused on development and producing. And I have worked both on the scripted and unscripted side, but currently I'm primarily focused on scripted television and feature films.
Thank you so much, everyone. For all of our participants at today's panel, our best possible outcome at the end of this hour is that you have a clear sense of best practices, the elements you need to prepare, and what that marketplace looks like to successfully shop or source content. If you're not aware, the attendees today include a wide range of talent on the content creation side and on the executive side. So we're very excited to have both of you here. And for all of us who have been on both sides of this conversation, shopping and sourcing content, this conversation for me is key because we want you to navigate the existing pipeline as successfully as possible and with as much information as possible. So we're going to start with step one. And I always like to say, in the industry, so many times we're told that step one is the meeting. Try and get a meeting, get a general, get a coffee. I want to reset your set one to assessing the marketplace. What is out there? What are people looking for? And how do I align myself with what the demand is in the marketplace? And Lynette, Maite, and Brett are here speaking very specifically to the experiences that they have had with their brands. But I want you to know, if anyone's ever told you that this is the Wild West, there are no rules, that's not necessarily true. There's really kind of common threads to best practices for moving through this space. So we're going to lean into their personal experiences, and then you'll start hearing things that will resonate to say, you know what, let me try this approach, or let me triple down on this because that seems to be something people welcome. And Lynette, I'd love to start with you for Bassett Vance, just getting a sense of, now we're looking at a production company. What are kind of some of the types of content that Bassett Vance takes a look at, is interested in? I know that you're leaning in scripted right now, so that's a first and important piece. What else?
So, first and foremost, it is scripted television and feature films. We are servicing a deal that we have. It is not a first look, but within that, or an overall, but within that deal, we're focused on features that are told from a BIPOC point of view. So BIPOC creators as well as BIPOC characters, and really specifically like through that lens, not going into a world that is unfamiliar, not a fish out of water. And those features are focused under $6 million. So movies that feel like they can be made for under $6 million contained. Outside of that, we are looking for stories that, again, celebrate diversity, BIPOC creators and women in the world of our television, half-hour dramedy. We are not big comedy, half-hour sitcom folks, as well as feature films. And the company is not set up for Angela and Courtney to necessarily star in things, but there is that potential opportunity. And I'd say that what is the DNA of a Bassett Vance project is we often talked about characters and how important characters are. But I believe in our company, it's as important. What is the theme? What is the creator, the writer, the director, the talent behind the story really trying to say? And what we're looking for is, even in something that's a dramedy or entertainment driven first, absolutely, because we're not in the business of education or politics, but having a really strong point of view and a strong theme that feels socially relevant and culturally specific.
Well, that's as excellent a description of a content mandate as possibly exists. Thank you. What I love about it, Lynette, is here's what we're looking for and here's what's not us. And I really want to carve that out as bullet point number one. There's what we're looking for and there's what we're not looking for. And sometimes you need to have a rep to get that information because some folks can only meet with rep talent. Other people will accept waivers. So one of the magic moments of this panel is that level of clarity. And still, every project that fits all of those may not be a fit for Bassett Vance. What is a recent project or projects, Lynette, that is there anything that you can share that has gone to air or that is kind of representative of where the brand sits right now?
Yes, I mean, the company is fairly new. Angela and Courtney are certainly not new to the business, nor am I, but the company was started in December. So I don't have anything to point to that is necessarily produced. But our first project that we did announce that I think encompasses much of what I was speaking about is we are doing a limited series based on the historical Tulsa 1921 massacre, but really our story is focused on the town of Greenwood, the community of Greenwood, which was in Tulsa, and really telling the story of how Black Wall Street came to be and all that was created and built by that community, as well as all that could have been, and that's kind of the unique story point. And our take on it is very much a love story. You know, we are, which I think is where I say we lead with entertainment, but it's very important to have strong thematic themes, and the writer certainly has something to say here about this event in history that has been covered in Lovecraft Country and also covered in a few other, narratives, but there hasn't been one singularly. But the reason for it coming out of a love story is, very much to tell the story of humanity, of character, of person, and then be able to tell the historical fact, because we really believe we are in the business of entertainment, and that's why we're not focused on documentaries.
Love that. Brett, you were going to say something before I go to you?
Just that The Watchmen was the other program that really kind of
Yes.
brought that to the popular
Yes.
in a really evocative, important way. I think that it's interesting. There's a number of projects in development set in the Tulsa, in Greenwood, either, before or even I think there's one immediately after, and what happens when they become refugees in their own country. There's a really, obviously, remarkable piece of history. One of the producers who pitched something like that to me referred to that period as American Wakanda, because that it was truly a remarkable.
And Brett, before we go into Sony, into SPE, I just want to double down on what you just said. There are multiple projects out there in this space. Everyone's going to have their take. These stories matter. This is the whole point of today's conference. And when we started with talking about the marketplace versus your content, it's because the marketplace is huge and there is room for content. And there's room for content that touches on the same subject area, that has your original take, your space on it. Brett, you said something a couple years ago that I loved when you were talking about the move for our giant multimedia conglomerates like a Sony, who were all trying to decide if they were going to spin off into streaming and start to go into the streaming space, which has just exploded demand around the world, as distributors. And you said all of those folks need content. We're going to up the content game, and that's when we first heard about Gemstone, etc. Where does Sony sit now in terms of the marketplace? Are you still content curation, and what are all of the different platforms where there's a play for folks?
So at Sony, we, as you said, we made the decision very intentionally not to enter into a war where all of our opponents had unlimited resources. It simply wasn't a wise strategy, as evidenced perhaps by Warner Media's recent activities with Discovery. So it was, there was a lot of money being spent there, and it wasn't necessarily the clear path to profit, or prominence was not available. So we decided very much to be in that war the arms dealer, and we wanted to give the very, very best content available. Yeah, Tony Vincicara hates when we use that expression, but it's just perfect. Because so we went about acquiring, the very, very best talent, and we have aggressively gone into the marketplace, and we work with everyone. We have, I would say, the only streaming platform with whom we do not have content at the moment is Disney Plus, but we have content at HBO Max, at obviously at Amazon, at Netflix, Paramount Plus, at Roku. We were like big in Quibi. Like, you know, we search for paths to distribution, and we make content on a number of different levels. At the television studios themselves are broken into a few different studios. So there's Sony Pictures Television Studios, which is the mothership. That's who produces our, so let's say, for instance, our 3 Emmy-nominated series, The Boys,
Shameless.
and Cobra Kai and Shark Tank. You know, that's, you know, just that's one of the things we do. And, you know, we also do big name series like The Good Doctor, you know, Blacklist, Them, SWAT. I didn't mean to put Them in that group. We just recently launched Them on Amazon. We did Woke with Hulu. So we have something in the vicinity of 20 some shows in production, 25 some shows in production. And we do that through our labels, Sony Pictures Television Studios. We also have TriStar Television, which is headed by Catherine Busby, our colleague and friend. And then we have Gemstone Studios, which is headed by Marie Jacobson, who former EVP of International Television. Gemstone Studios just launched Fantasy Island the other night on Fox, and their charge is to do premium quality content at a significantly reduced budgetary level. So if you looked at Fantasy Island the other night, you would not be able to imagine the price at which we did that, but it was, you know, it was far reduced from what we normally do for our broadcast or certainly for our streaming series. And then in addition to that, we have Affirm, which is our faith-based label. Affirm Films is the most successful faith-based label that there is. We recently launched Affirm Television. We set up a couple of projects with Stefan Curry and a couple other folks. We have Sony Pictures International Television, which develops, as the name indicates, projects for international distribution. So what we like to say at Sony is that we have a number of paths to yes. And our goal is to find authentic voices who are engaged in committed, authentic, innovative storytelling that is able to reach audiences as diverse as the audiences that we throughout the globe that we hope to reach.
Brett, again, so crystal clear, right? I loved Lynette's specificity as a production company about this is the content that's on brand for my folks. I love your granularity with all of those studios, right? In terms of, well, these folks do this, they do this at this price point. Everyone,
Correct.
If you're not doing this already, and I'm a nerd, so just bear with me, do you see why we want you to start with thoroughly assessing the marketplace? And I mean spreadsheet level, because listen, this is being sponsored. This particular panel is being sponsored by Disney General Entertainment Content and my wonderful former boss, SVP Tim McNeil. And part of that work that we were constantly doing was trying to explain how massive the world was at DGE. And you had to be able to understand what the different possibilities were, both as studio and network possibilities, so you could play with strategy inside of what is now a giant global playing field. Brett, that was flawless. Now we're going to go to the network side.
It was a little bit flawed. That I did. I forgot to mention our Oscar-winning Sony Pictures Animation, which is really getting into television aggressively. So we're doing series for HBO Max. We're doing series for Adult Swim. We're doing. There's a great deal of activity on the animation side as well. So.
Can we go ahead and speak that particular Oscar-winning project up, since you introduced me to it? I cried the first time I watched it.
Well, there could be Hair Love. That's one of our Oscar-winning projects, now being turned into a TV series, Young Love, for HBO Max, produced by Matthew Cherry and Oscar winner Karen Tolliver. Or we could be talking about Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. We started the first Afro-Latino version of Spider-Man, and was also a Oscar winner. So, whichever one you want to talk about.
Thank you so much, Brett. I know you didn't want to go that detailed, so I appreciate letting me drag that out of you. I feel like this is a gauntlet being thrown, Miss Maite. But let's go now to the network side, though technically also the production side. You're also dealing with an absolutely massive network series of platforms at A&E. So talk to us about your marketplace and what some of the kind of content mandates are there.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I would say we're still linear first. So, A&E is a place with a lot of legacy programming, and we continue on with our legacy programming. When I talk about that, I talk about, shows like Biography, The First 48, Intervention, Hoarders. And these are shows that, still perform for us. And these are shows, that interestingly enough, when you talk about the marketplace and what people should be looking for, it's know your brands, know who you're pitching, know who, what is that landscape and what is the bar. I would say that's, mainly for us, the focus at A&E. You can find our programming streaming and on demand as well. But really we are linear first when it comes to A&E. And I work in the production and development department for A&E, making these shows, having these meetings with different third parties, producers. We're also internally generating development as well. So ideas come from everywhere. Conversations come from everywhere. And I can't stress that enough about knowing your brand and knowing how to pitch to your brand, if that is helpful.
It is. And in fact, because there's all of these other sister networks and certainly in Unscripted, that is the first rule, right? The shows are so specific to brand that if there's something that you're like, this is perfect for Lifetime, it probably isn't a match for A&E. And so
right.
I want the big takeaway number 2 from the panel to be, and this may be a shift for some folks or an affirmation for some folks. There are 2 ways people approach content in television. The first way is I've got this one project and I'm very, very in love with it and precious about it, and I'm going to try and get it out to every single platform that I can. And the reason I wanted to start with assessing the marketplace is that's a really limiting approach to content sales, because that is only going to be on brand for a handful of spaces. So if you've been trained to say this is a spaghetti on the wall thing, you take this one project and you just splat it at everyone that you can get an email for, I want you to pause on that and realize that rather than taking one project and going broad, we want you to build out your own slate, multiple projects, so that you can go very specifically. Because something that's right for freeform is not something you will ever bring to FX, right? And so we really I just had to get that Disney drop in there. Okay, I'm back. So I really want you guys to take a breath. If you only have one project, your next step, I would urge you, even as you're trying to shop that, is to develop some more projects. Because when you come into the room, and getting into the room is the last step. We want you in the room when you're ready to advance the relationship and advance the project. If the first reaction to that project is, that's not really a fit, the meeting ends. Or you're like, oh, well, I have a couple more things that might be on brand. And you keep that conversation going. So content shoppers, sellers, creators, we want you building your slate and then looking into the marketplace for the places for which your content could be a great fit. And you will have a very different experience shopping targeted content to targeted platforms and targeted companies than you will just generically saying, okay, here's my movie, who's interested? Here's my pitch, who's interested? Before we move on to step 2, I just want to pause. Lynette, any thoughts to that? Same thing, Maite, Brett, coming to you. But any thoughts to that before we move on? Because that's a shift I really want folks to embrace.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we're doing right now, so one of my responsibilities at the studio is I run talent development programs like our diverse writers program, our diverse directors program. And we just entered a part with our diverse writers program where we are having our writers, we've gathered 16 writers from various backgrounds and underrepresented communities to come to the lot, and there's a whole thing. But anyway, right now the pitching part is that we had each of them submit ideas for consideration for development, 3 ideas each. And those ideas were judged not only, or the writers who we sent to development wasn't just based on if they had one great idea. It was both on the commercial viability of those ideas and their clear ability to generate more than one idea that was of quality and interesting and innovative. So your ability to have many concepts at your fingertips is critical when you have the rare occasion to be in a room with somebody, with an executive like someone on the screen. In contrast, but I would also say, do not pitch 10 things to that person, because then you are desperate and hungry. What you want to have is a couple of things that you can discuss, but you can't have 15. Well, what about this? Well, what about this? You can't do that. That cannot be the tenor of the conversation.
I love that. And I want to say, just for the folks on the other side, the buyer side, if you were in this panel as participants, what you just heard these 3 folks do is one of the most important things we have to keep doing in this industry, because everyone doesn't have a rep and they're not all getting these mandates, being emailed or called to them. So what can we do to make sure that what we're looking for and what our platform distinctions are can be crystal clear? We want talent combing the trades, reading announcements, coming to events like this. But if you're not already, make sure that you're making opportunity in your day, right? Your Friday afternoons, once a month, once a quarter, to bring talent in that folks are kind of referring to you and talk crystal clear about your mandates. Watch how different all of the engagement looks when people just have a clear, true north of what is a win for your platform, which, as we know, changes sometimes every year, if not every quarter. So message that so it's easier for people to do the next step. And we spent the most time on the first step because that's the thing that closes all the gaps. Learning the marketplace and pitching with intention to the spaces that are really looking for content like yours. Now we want them to develop the materials for the pitch. Brett, we're going to start with scripted. And we're going to start, and this is a television conference, so we're going to talk about scripted television. If someone has something that's a great fit for one of your platforms and they're coming in and I'm going to talk about a pitch meeting, not a general, because we're really trying to talk about shopping and selling content. What do you need to have them prepared? What do they need to have prepared when they come in and sit down across from you? What do you want to see?
So I always say that the tone and tenor of a pitch meeting is important and sometimes as important as the content. Basically what everyone needs in a pitch for a television is a simple log line that explains exactly what the concept is in a brief 2 to 3 sentence format. Then they need a paragraph log line that they can kind of repeat that premise and expand on it a little bit further. And then they need a 7 to 10 minute pitch, 7 to 15 minute pitch that really explains what this show is, what I'm going to see on the screen. So, what is the world we are going to explore? Who are the characters with whom we will explore that world? What is the manner in which that world will be explored? What are the obstacles towards success? What are the complications? What are the twists? You need to have a presentation that is a verbal presentation that is going to basically tell the show this. You kind of start with where the world that you want to explore is and how you're going to explore it. You finish with saying, "This is my TV show." You expand on that TV show, the characters that are going to be in it, the way the storytelling is going to work, and then maybe something of a pilot story is, or a way to get into the series is told. And then that's about it. You should now be able to, you should have folks engaged enough that you are now involved in a conversation, and they should be asking you questions about, does this happen? Is this person going to go in this direction? Is this person going to go in that direction? What's going to happen? It is not a performance, but it is neither is it a conversation. You are doing a presentation, and it's basically like you are telling a very good story at a very good dinner party. So your story has energy, it has pace. It's a good dinner party, so these are smart people who understand what you're saying. It's a good story, so you want to get through it. You're telling it with enthusiasm and with passion, but you're not going Tom Cruise on Oprah's chair. You don't, it is not a performance. You don't go crazy, okay? The other thing that is very, very helpful and more helpful as time goes on in script, pitch decks. Nicely done decks that give you the feel, the tone, the look of the series, and the way that your audience is supposed to feel. You're supposed to capture that either in a pitch deck or in a rip-o-matic, which a rip-o-matic takes existing elements from other shows, other movies, etc., and puts those together and gives a feeling of what the show is going to look like.
What we used to call a Frankenreel.
Frankenreel. There was a time when I used to say, in terms of leave behinds, that you try not to leave something behind. I think that time has passed, and I think I think that you now need to have at least a deck that says what your concept is, what your content is going to look like, and what you're hoping to set up, so that can be socialized and sold up with whomever you need to get your approvals from.
Last question, Brett. Do you want anyone to go out and shoot a pilot before they come and pitch their show?
Good God, no. You can shoot a proof of concept. You can shoot perhaps a trailer, but even that is most likely not a great use of your funds or your time. Unless your vision for this show is so unique and so visually innovative and involving some heretofore unseen technology, when you partner with a studio, they want to be part of the development process. They want to be part of the creative process. And you stimulating their imagination is going to be much easier verbally and even with a deck than it is with the whatever you had to shoot and the remarkable compromises you had to make in order to shoot that piece of content. In other words, you don't have the $500,000 to shoot the pilot. So wait till someone has the money to run the pilot.
And I love what you said about other uses for that money, where you could go into a beautifully produced, and designed deck that you hire someone to do, or coverage, so that someone can really walk through this pitch with you, so that it really sings. Lynette, you're in scripted also. What might you add or shift from your own take on what you guys want to see when people come into the room?
So I think the difference between maybe pitching to a studio or a buyer is in pitching to a production company. I like to hear the person's personal connection to the material. So that's something I would add, not their whole life story, not a biography. But if you're pitching a medical show and you happen to go to med school, or your parents were both doctors, I want to hear that at the front of the pitch. Like, this is a world I know. I grew up in Missouri. My parents were doctors. This is about a small general hospital set in Missouri. I actually, thought I was going to go to med school and was a biology major. Something, that gives me a sense of what your personal connection is, particularly if it's something that you're not pitching on an assignment, meaning like you're not coming in to pitch on a book, or you're not bringing a book, maybe you fell in love with, but still, if you can find what your personal way in is and what makes you unique to tell this story, to tell that succinctly at the top, and then get into your log line, your paragraph, your characters. And I think oftentimes I'm out in the marketplace now with pitches, it's getting writers and creators to trust there is going to be a discussion, that our pitch is really great. And so let's get it down to the under 15 minutes, because they're like, but we didn't say this part, or like I cut things out. And I'm like, because I've done this long enough to know that a smart buyer, if they're interested, is going to ask that question. And then we can answer it in the discussion, and we can answer it as a team. And I think that's what Brett's referring to. Like, your producer or your studio wants to be involved in the development and in helping to shape it. And so don't be afraid to leave things for the discussion. And if they don't ask, they probably weren't engaged, and that's not the match. That's not the place anyway. So really getting things down under 15 minutes, and definitely in the world of Zoom. It was already quite popular to have a visual deck, but when you are lots of little boxes, it is definitely become like imperative, and people do want leave behinds because you're not in an office anymore. You can't just walk to someone's door and be like, I heard this great pitch, and repeat it within 5 minutes of hearing it. You probably have to wait for a scheduled Zoom or another time. So having that deck as a refresher is really helpful when you have to pitch it up the ladder. So I think that's another reason why, as a creator, really think about, can that deck succinctly be a reminder to the person who heard the pitch to tell it to 10 other people as the great dinner party guest,
I love that. Could you add just one more thought, because you brought up books. Where do we stand right now on intellectual property, on that underlying IP, books, plays, docs? Is that really fueling content for you guys right now?
Absolutely. I mean, every single time you go into a buyer, if you have IP under it, they'll say to you, that's really helpful. That's really helpful. So, but IP is so many things now. And just going back to it again, what I think Brett said is, do not go shoot your whole pilot. Do not spend money you don't have. But in the proof of concept, if you're adapting your own short, I actually have 2 projects where someone's adapting their own short. That was made for something specific that they were, one was a festival and another one was for the web. It's really helpful that you can even create your own IP. So that is how popular IP is. Like, your own short film can become your IP, but definitely, we think of the traditional things like books and plays and remakes, but there's also the world of like now articles, blogs, life rights. I mean, there's so much out there that I've seen and I've been pitched based on IP, foreign film. So you have to make sure you have the rights. Don't go in and pitch something and then expect me to go find the rights as the production company. I mean, that can happen. But generally, at least find out if they're available before you go do all this work and then come in and say, I had a writer come in and said, I want to do a remake of this show, and had like a full pitch. And I'm like, they're already remaking that show. Like, that doesn't, so great idea, great pitch. You don't have the rights and you didn't check that they weren't available. So,
which is another great use of money other than shooting a pilot. Please have a lawyer. Please have a lawyer, so anyone you're pitching with, that you guys have a clear agreement on everything about your partnership, intellectual property that you have a clean contract for, etc. Let's take it to you, Maite, in the wonderful world of unscripted, where we do see, depending on the format, a different, what are you going to bring in for competitive reality versus a docuseries versus a straight doc, a lifestyle format, etc. Because it does range. What are some of your thoughts?
Absolutely. Well, I would like to say that, building off of very similar to what Brett and Lynette are saying, so it's important to have all those things that they spoke about, but in unscripted, your clear log line, I would say clarity. I think the shows that do the best are like the ones you can sum up in a sentence. I love always using the example of Real World. 7 strangers live in a house. Clearly tell me, what is the show? What are we doing here? I think also to Lynette's point, when she talks about, making sure you have the rights and stuff like that, access is important for us for unscripted, no matter what, right? Do you have the access to this world? Especially a lot of times when we do shows about prison or crime, do you have this access? That is really important. Also, back to what Brett's saying, it is kind of very much like a dinner party when you are pitching, make sure you have, the tone right, but also in these decks and maybe the presentation tape, make sure there's again, back to the clarity, the outline, really the format, not just the tone, but on top of that, those decks. We really need to see the structure. Where are we going from point A to point B? You know, that would be the biggest thing I really say about the decks. Like, sure, it can look pretty. That's great. But break it down for us. How do you see this happening? How do you see this unfolding act for act? I think that's my biggest takeaway most from the stuff that we've talked about. Pretty much, I agree everything else with Lynette and Brett are saying in terms of, you know, we really want authentic storytelling. You know, how are you the expert? How do you have access? And again, just being clear and really knowing where you're going with your pitch, if that's helpful.
Maite, one of the shifts that happened now probably 15 years ago, but holds strong, is how much unscripted can be talent driven, not necessarily celebrity driven, but who is your, you know, who is your dog whisperer, you know? So
Yeah.
can you talk about a sizzle reel, which is about the show, versus that talent or cast reel? And how important is that still to you when you're looking at content?
It's very important. So great point to bring up. You know, we're always looking, as I'm sure every place is, right? Big characters, loud characters, characters that are authentic of their world. How can they hold their own in their world? So I would say, yes, there are some ideas that come in and it's the casting, right? It's like, this guy's great. Like, got to get this guy on TV, right? So of course, if you're bringing that in, that you have that person, that talent locked up pretty much. Again, to like Lynette's point, don't pitch me someone who's out there that you haven't even met yet and you don't even have a deal with or anything like that. That kind of just doesn't make sense, right? Of course, we would all love to make a show with whomever. So that's really important. The difference between the casting and I would say maybe a presentation tape is that, yes, we want to see great talent, but if you can show me their world, right? Because that's what we're going to get into. Their show, like what A&E loves is that immersive experience, right? Don't just retell me a story of someone in the past or anything like that. Bring me along front row and show me into the world, you know, of these characters. Again, I agree with Lynette and Brett, do not spend a ton of money trying to shoot your own pilot. We totally want to be part of that process. But it is, you know, just great to just go and spend a day and give me a slice of life, right? Of your talent and go spend a day with them.
I used to say, show me the talent in their natural habitat, because that's really like how it feels sometimes. Like you can give me a one sheet with a picture of Gordon Ramsay and, you know, in a small remote town, you know, in South America, or I can see him tromping across the beach, you know, to try and make a meal, you know, out, you know, on the beach. If I had the option for two is going to be a stronger, I'm going to see what the show is.
100%.
And I think that's true, right, for everyone. When you finish the pitch, everyone has to know what the show is. Literally, what am I going to be watching every week or in 10 successive episodes because it's so bingeable. And that is really an emotional and a visual, and you said it just now, Maite, a structural gift that you're giving us in that pitch. It's why pitching is such an art form, because you've got 15 minutes or less to make it crystal clear what's going to happen at the White Lotus. Sorry, I said binge, and then for some reason, the White Lotus came to my mind. What in the world with that episode? Okay, you guys, love this. Let's just go to the personal here. Lynette, I want to come back to you. They've targeted Bassett Vance. It's a great fit for a project. They've come in with their story and, you know, all of their beautiful assets, their pitch pages. They have a really kind of nice little, you know, rip-o-matic reel. What's you personally, what sings for you in a pitch? What makes a winning pitch for you?
I mean, I think when, you know, we're speaking about television, it's when I can already start thinking about season 2, because I'm so in love with the characters, and I might not have the right answers. They may not want to take those characters there, but they've already created characters in the room and a premise. And a tone of the pitch my imagination starts running away as a development executive of all the things we can be doing with this story and these characters and the premise. So that is when I know, okay, this is a winner. Like I'm already thinking about, how we're going to get there. Um, and I'd say outside of that, again, for me, it's when I feel like someone is an expert and they're the only person who can tell this story, particularly if I'm, working with mid-level talent and down, that also is like a winner for me. Like I know that this person can tell this story because it's not biographical, but they put so much of their own into it. And I've either learned something, had my eyes open to something, or felt something emotionally that is coming from their voice. We talk oftentimes about voice. And I think that, distinctly voice is when someone can be so specific and you feel like they're the only person who can tell the story.
Mhm. And you know what I want to lean into, because Brett teed this up and you just paid this off so nicely. The pitch is not reciting the plot points of a pilot. It's the world, it's the character, it's the tone, it's the emotion. That might be a shift for folks, particularly if you're a screenwriter who's used to coming in to tell detailed points of story, as opposed to the people we're going to fall in love with and want to watch for 100 episodes. Brett, add to that. What's something that just makes your little heart sing if it happens in a pitch?
Yeah, that's the whole point of it, is that you can't stop thinking about this world. Like if they presented you a world and a way into that world that is unique and you haven't actually considered that before. And as mentioned earlier, you're right, having a personal connection to that story, and having a demonstrable ability to tell that story in a unique way, I absolutely get excited about that, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. But uh, when a world is presented that seems to have endless possibilities for exploration, that's really, really, really exciting. When it's a world that has characters that you really want to see, are they going to be able to move through their obstacles and move towards success? And can I root for them? All of those things. I'll give two super old examples because I've been doing this for 1,000 years and I was involved with two really old shows. I started at Fox when they launched X-Files, and I knew that that was going to be the biggest thing that they ever did because, not that they ever did, but because the story possibilities were endless. And then I was lucky enough to launch both Supernatural and The Boys with Eric Kripke, the executive producer. And those shows, the moment you had the pitch of Supernatural, you knew that there was endless possibilities to be told because it was a retelling of classic horror stories done in a new way with an underlying mythology that was going to carry you through season after season. It was crazy. Like you knew from the moment, like if we pull this off, this is going to be big forever. And same thing with The Boys. The concept of The Boys was so radical and so harsh, but we knew if we could pull it off correctly, it was going to be gigantic. So it's really the world. I get very, very excited about the world, and when I hear about a world that is going to undergo and is able to accept endless exploration, then that's what gets really exciting for me.
I love that. And Brett, I want to double down on, before you go into a room, look up the person you're meeting with. Look them up, see where they've worked, see what shows they've worked on. I want you to know what their alma mater is. It's really important that if there is a point of connection, an authentic point of connection between what you're pitching, what you're doing, and something that was meaningful to them, that can go a long way. So I love that, Brett. I find that personal way in. What about for you, Maite? What just is like, yes, if it happens in a pitch meeting?
I mean, it's exactly what both of them are saying. It's like seconds. I'm always like, what's second season? Like, where are we going? How can we keep going? Amy loves to like shed a light on a world that maybe we don't know about, right? That isn't so, popular. So what am I learning? Like, what are you exposing me to? Like, how am I falling in love with, this world and these characters and really kind of information that I may not have known before, and that's exciting when you just keep learning and have that entertainment forward purpose. with the content. And again, just multiple seasons and being able to keep going.
Yeah, I hope everyone's hearing how collaborative everyone wants and expects this to be. So in this meeting, 2 great rules. Number 1, don't defend the concept, right? It's not a PhD dissertation. You're coming in with something that everyone's hoping to run like a football team down a field with, right? And so if you've got people saying, what if, what about, your response is yes and, not that's not what the show is. Does that make sense? Because you're trying to get people to invest in you, the show, and that means it's got to be brought along a journey for the brand, for that production company, for the studio, for the network. It's going to keep growing and changing. And then the opposite of that is, I like to say, as soon as you get the yes, the meeting is over. Stop at yes. It's like, well, thank you so much. Let me leave this back and follow up. Brett, take it away. Just close with that one, and we'll go to our final thought.
Yes. I've been lucky enough to sell a few shows in the room, and there is a great temptation after everybody says, well, yeah, let's do this, to keep talking about the possibilities, about what you might do differently about it. No, get out that room. Let them call your agent. Get out. You just got a yes. That is a rarity. It happened in the room. Accept that lovely, wonderful fortune and walk away and let the deal get started. Yeah. Do not. And yet, no longer conversation. Thank you for your time. Pardon me?
You got to be Viola Davis, just getting your purse and just like stepping out of frame. Yes doesn't come with the check, everyone. Yes doesn't come with the check anytime soon. Yes comes with, great, let's start talking about this. Maybe they're going to ask you to do some additional passes. Maybe you're going to get to a deal. Yes comes with potentially weeks or months of continued conversation and negotiations before you ever start the project. So that's why you've got your multiple projects going. Last question. I'm being mindful of the clock here, you guys. We've talked about this. I want to talk about the way in. How do people get to you? Your preferred way. I want to start with Brett because there's multiple ways that folks can get in, right? Some people are reps only. Some people, it's like, don't sleep on the fellowships and the programs, leverage the talent, the DEI teams. You're all of those things. So go. What is the way for someone to get to you?
Certainly the preferred way is through representation. Certainly, particularly someone rep that I already have a relationship with, that's always the best way. That will get the quickest attention. But as heading up our creative efforts in D&I at the studio, I have a couple of talent development programs from which we also that are also entry points into the studio. So I have a diverse writers program that is that's in the middle of running right now, that will launch again in May of next year. I have a diverse directors program that's open to all submissions. That would be that opens for submissions right after Labor Day. And through those talent development programs, I have often set creative meetings with our program participants and our program participant alumni, with creative executives, producers, etc. But the primary way that I get, and another way that I get to talent is through our partner organizations, such as Walter Cates, NALEAP, ABFF, CAPE, GLAD. These organizations, Respectability, the organizations that we look to that are that have specific affinity groups and who work with underrepresented communities. We work with those folks too, and those projects will come to me through those people as well. But generally speaking, you can't come to me directly without representation. There are exceptions where at times I can sign a waiver, but generally speaking, we look to representation to reach out to us with projects to pitch.
Thank you. Maite.
Honestly, he sums it up quite well. It's kind of the same thing, I know we're short on time, so I don't want to go through a whole laundry list, but really it is the exact same way.
Fabulous. Anything different for you, Lynette?
No, in fact, we started off being open to having submission release forms, and our volume is so high that I have to have people go through representation, and that's already, it tells me you've gotten through one gateway and that this material is ready to be seen by a producer.
And I just want to say to everyone at all levels on this call, that the goal isn't to try and flood reps and get anyone to read you. It's not a spaghetti on the wall thing. That's why I was so deliberate with this incredible panel. Assess the marketplace, get a sense of where the stuff that you're doing sings, get it developed, with money that you're spending for coverage, work in writers groups, do everything you can to make it the best material that it can be. And then when you've done that and you can say, here's the clear audience for this, here's the XYZ, then you can start leveraging getting those doors open, right? Now you can go to reps who actually cover in those spaces and say, I've got something, would you take a read of it? Would you consider, reading and submitting? Or going to the talent teams, at the places and saying, you know what, I've got something kind of special. It won this competition. The door isn't closed. It's just narrowed because the bandwidth is so tight for all of the folks on this side of the conversation. But if you put your email out, no one does the earlier work. They just start flooding you, hoping that they're going to get lucky. And that is not an emerging talent thing only. This is not spaghetti on the wall. You go find the right markets. You narrow down who the right kind of prodcos and networks and studios are. Then you go to work on what will probably only be 3 or 4 spaces on a way in through people that you know, through reps that work there, through the talent teams, etc. Trust me on this. If you try to do this with more focus, you will get great results. That is it for time because we only have one question, which I want to get to. So the question was, if you're experienced talent and now you're being asked to create a production budget, how do you learn to prepare and submit those budgets? I would first say if you are in the guild, that's, Producers Guild, Writers Guild, they all have wonderful seminars and sessions on production budgeting. And I personally would answer as someone who was the creative side, that's why you take your money and hire a line producer to bust that out for you, right? That's a line producer's job. But then pay them to teach you, to walk you through it. So you understand how this written material turned into this spreadsheet and this calendar. Anyone else have thoughts for that?
Yeah, only
I
that
agree.
you should
If
really
it-
Go ahead.
No, just that I agree that I would have, if it was me as an independent producer and at points in my career where I have been, I would pay someone that is their profession, their field, like it's just for that exact budget and make sure that I understand that budget.
Yes. And then the final question people asked about the film festivals that showcase TV pilots, etc. How or do you use those events to find and nurture new series creators of color? So does anyone I know I've read and judged for some of them, but is there anyone else who's leveraging those third-party film festivals and pitch things, pitch sessions at those events?
I've attended pitch sessions at a couple of conferences. Well, one in particular, NALEAP has a thing called the Media Marketplace, where they do curated conversations with producers and executives. And I haven't made anything out of that, but the studio actually, with some filmmakers that I met about 4 years ago, and then another executive from Sony met the following year, we ended up making a film with them that was initially pitched at NALEAP and was released electronically this year, last week.
That's terrific. I like it for building relationships and meeting other talent.
Yeah, that's
and
really
visibility. But nothing's going to beat studying the marketplace, getting extremely focused about where your content fits, and then going down the rabbit hole of how to get that content in front of those precise kind of platforms. You guys, I want to thank the panel so very much for your incredibly insightful and specific information. I hope this was helpful for the attendees. We're going to put the poll up one more time. Let's go ahead and post the poll. If you'll take 30 seconds, we want to see what the takeaways were from the panel. This will be so helpful for us as we keep trying to develop extremely advanced and authentic professional offerings for CATES and HCF. So while you're taking that poll, I just want to personally thank my wonderful friends, Brett, Lynette, new friend, Maite. How in the world we did not work together, I still don't know.
I know.
But thank you for your insight and your excellence, and for all you do to champion creatives and their content, particularly our BIPOC folks and other underrepresented talent. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That was an amazing panel. I told you that there would be tons of gems dropped. I hope all of you took notes. And for me, I'm going to take the S. I'm going to do the choreography and take the S. It seems so simple, but I greatly appreciated just all of the insight and knowledge and from so many different perspectives that were just shared. So thank you so much, DMA, and all of our panelists. Keeping the energy going, we are headed into another hot topic panel, Global Greenlight, Content Creators and Platforms Expanding the Global Lens. And this is produced in collaboration with Entertainment Speakers Bureau. As the new distribution landscape intersects with an ever-expanding global marketplace, producers and executives alike provide insights on new market opportunities and developing content across the international spectrum. To lead this dialogue, please help me welcome manager, producer, co-founder, Alta Global Media, Stephen Adams.
Thank you, Dana. I appreciate that kind introduction. And our panel today is Global Greenlight, Content Creators and Platforms, Expanding the Global Lens. Our description here is that as the new distribution landscape intersects with an ever-expanding global marketplace, producers and executives are going to provide insights on new market opportunities in developing content across an international spectrum. And our guests today are Perez Owino, storyteller from Kenya. We have Samad Davis, a US-based entrepreneur and philanthropist and international film and television maker, and Brendan Gabriel, executive with the Africa Channel Studios. Let's just jump right on into the conversation with Samad. Samad, I'd like to start with you because given that your mantra is bridging cultural gaps between America and the power of entertainment, arts, tech, sports, and business, which happens to be a fundamental theme of this year's Hollywood Creative Forum, can you give us a little bit of context on how you achieved that mission, and in what ways has your career been of service to that goal?
Well, I appreciate it. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm honored. This is great. I love this kind of stuff. So I've been in film and television. I'm an entrepreneur first and foremost. So I don't call myself a filmmaker. I'm an entrepreneur. I think like an entrepreneur. I went into film school many years ago in New York City as an entrepreneur. And I took the lessons from learning the rules of engagement for film and television. And then I just applied it and put a business model behind it. So I've been creating content on my own, owning my IP, funding it, distributing it, and owning the IP for a very long time. I want to say 14 years ago, I had an opportunity to go to Africa, almost 14 years ago. And it had nothing to do with film and television. But I want to say 3 years into that journey of going back and forth to Africa, I realized the opportunity and the energy that was happening on the ground in terms of film and television, whether it would be music videos, whether it be the television shows. And I was with my uncle, and my uncle, who worked across Africa for 50 years, we were in a hotel in Ghana, and I was watching television, and I said, this music video looked really, really bad. And he said, well, do something about it. That's your background, right? Why don't you be value added? Why don't complain about it? See how you can integrate your background in that space and partner with people on the ground in Africa, right? And the light bulb went off. And I said, you know what? That's a really good idea. And then when being in Africa, you realize how much influence America has on everybody from, one of our number one exports, which is content, right? So people see America through the lens of the shows that they watch, the movies that they watch. And so I understood the power of that. I understand, you're from America. Okay, yeah, you're from New York. Yes, I want to go to New York because of all the movies that they've seen. So I said, you know what, let me start introducing my background. Let me have a skill transfer program. I started that kind of stuff out in Ghana, doing music videos Prior to that, we did 1,000 music videos in America for everybody in the business, roughly. And then we started doing that for the artists in Ghana. And then we started winning awards for the artists in Ghana, which made the other directors on the ground step their game up. And so we stepped out of the music video business, but we just wanted to put some energy into the business there and elevate. And from music videos, that led us to having relationships with brands and banks and for sponsorship opportunities for TV content, right? So you start doing TV content and then you realize, wait a minute, if we're going to start producing this type of content, then we need to skill up the actors. So we had an acting program, television series that we put all these different talent into, to unearth the talent and give them the skills to be able to work in television programs and movies. So when you look fast forward to now and you see companies like Netflix and Africa Channel and all these other channels and platforms who are now pumping a lot of money into Africa, you know, it feels good to be able to play a part in that. And then you look at, okay, if I'm going to create a project, how do I integrate, if I'm shooting in South Africa, for instance? Well, how do I integrate somebody from Ghana or somebody from Nigeria or somebody from Kenya or somebody from America? How do we tell a story? We can kind of put all these different people into it, and therefore you then give the finished product legs, right? So now you can distribute it in other markets besides the one market. And I think that's always been a problem. Even as it relates to African-American content in the US, you know, we were told that your films don't travel overseas until you go overseas and you see that somebody that you might view as a C-list actor is a big deal. Well, you say, well, how do you know that actor? Because they've been watching that act. They watch everything. Right. So you realize, okay, the power of film and television, the power to get it to travel. And as an entrepreneur and as an independent content creator, you have to think how do you incorporate people into your stories that you tell so that you can monetize it, so that you can license it in different markets because it's relatable. It has someone who a particular country really likes and is looking forward to watching it. So that's my thing in terms of bridging the gap. I think when you give an opportunity, create content where you can bring people together from different markets, that's the start. And that's just the entrepreneurial spirit. And I think the way the industry is going right now, I mean, we're in a global world right now. I mean, we're in a global market. It's just a matter of what time zone you wake up in, right? Where we're all getting the same information.
Absolutely.
It's just what time do you wake up to read it? So that's how I view content. I don't believe in just making something for one specific thing right now. Because as humans, we all have the same emotions, right? We all love, we all have family, we all, you know, have dreams and aspirations. So you just tap into that. So that's kind of a hodgepodge of what my approach is all about. And then you meet along the way. You meet the Brendans of the world. Hi, Brendan. You see? Yes.
Well, good. This is good. No, but you bring. I want to return to one of them is best practices. The other one is, you know, how to also spread these the business acumen. The fact that ROI is important to story. So let's put a circle around that and come back to it. Perez, you know, as a content creator, your work has also been a literal bridge in terms of cultural expression, and you were able to do this very pointedly in your documentary, Bounds: Africans versus African Americans. Can you talk about the origins of that project, why you chose to explore all that in such depth?
I think if you've watched the documentary, the origin of the project is literally in the documentary, and that's because when I came to the United States, one of the most fundamental things for me, one of the things I felt was necessary for me to do was to connect, because as an African, I really wanted to connect with African Americans. And the first African American I met is the one who told me that, because when you come from Africa, you're used to seeing every Black person is African. So when I saw him in the hallway, immediately I was like, oh, he's African. So I asked him which country he was from. And he made a point of letting me know that he was from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and my people sold him. Literally, that was the first statement we had.
Okay, there's
But,
a little bridge that we have to, there's a little divide that we have
yeah.
to bridge there.
But the interesting thing about that situation is the reason why I even approached him was I thought he was cute. So the cuteness still remained. And I was like, well, but still cute. So now I was like, oh, well, let's have a conversation about it. You know what I mean? And then we became friends, of course. But that was the initial thing was, oh my God, that's so cute. And that is literally the way to build this bridge. It's the easiest way is to be like, oh, wow. And we became
Cross-continental dating.
friends.
There you go.
Yeah. Now, if he ever sees this interview, it is the first time he will ever realize that the reason I approached him is because I thought he was cute. He doesn't know
It could
that
be
to
a
this
game
day.
changer.
Yeah, I've never told him. And so that for me became, and then I started to, and then what happened in that university was, because they usually separate the international students from the Black Students Union. And so we merged the two because there was it's University of Wisconsin, there's 12 of us and we're split up. So we decided to just kind of create this one place where all Black students, regardless of where you're from, could congregate. And that to me, then of course I moved to Los Angeles, and then there was this further shifting away from the Black community. And I had to sit with myself and ask myself why I came with one purpose, and now I felt like I was really going the opposite direction. By this time, I'd been in America for a while. But everywhere I went, every space I went, whether I was sitting with my friends from Howard University or whatever, this conversation would come up. So I decided to do a documentary about it, to finally just put this on the table and let's have a conversation so we can go beyond this, because this seemed to be a stumbling block. It seemed to be something we were constantly tripping ourselves. We were constant. And then one thing that I hoped would have happened, which was going to be the bonding of Africans and African Americans, because our history is very different from everybody else's history. There's really a tearing apart. And I felt like,
Yes.
we would have this urge to reunite, because I fundamentally believe that when you pull people away from their homes, that there were those people who are left behind who are still searching. And there are people who've gone forward we are all searching on both coasts. And that it is then, as the generations, as we keep going older, younger and younger, it is our responsibility to bridge that gap again, to find each other. So that's one of the reasons I also made the doc, was a call to action, for all of us, that
Yes.
we are not just responsible for each other, we're also responsible for Africa. And within the diaspora, we have people who have such an immense, the skill of the people in the African diaspora, whether they're in South America, they're in North America, they're in Europe, they're in Asia, or in the continent of Africa, together, that we can do something. I think that's where our power lies.
Yeah.
That's where our power,
No,
and I
it
feel
was
like that's what this, go ahead, sorry.
No, it was interesting. I heard Oswald Boateng talk about his predictions for the 21st century, and he said, "Oh, that's easy. The reunion of Africa and her children, her diaspora, is going to be one of the most startling and most powerful reconnections through technology that the world's ever seen." And I think it's absolutely true.
Oh yeah,
Did I lose you,
imagine,
Perez?
can you imagine?
Oh, there we go.
Yes, no, I had muted myself. Just thinking about that, to me, is I feel like it's been 500 plus years, and I think it's time.
It's time.
Honestly, it's time.
And
Because, and I'm
technology
getting
can
upset.
do.
I'm getting
Technology can.
upset. It's
Yeah,
time.
please go ahead.
Yeah,
Yes, it is
I
time.
feel like
Technology
there's
can
something.
do what.
Mhm.
No. I want you to please, Perez.
No, because I was just saying that when you look at the continent and what we've been through as a people, I just feel within my core that there's a call and there's a crying out from way far back that is just telling us that it is time to mend this. It's time to step
Yes.
into your power. It is time to be who we were meant to be.
Yes.
It's time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, Brendan Gabriel, let's talk about the Africa Channel's mandates and the work that's being done both domestically and globally to bridge that cultural gap that we're talking about. And I think that the Africa Channel's done a tremendous job and has much more ahead. So you can describe what's gone on in the past and some of the future plans.
Thank you. And what a lovely lead into this part of the talk, because, well, we've been doing just that, bridging the gap between Africa and, well, I would say North America primarily, and the beginning of our business for over 15 years now. And we started off initially as a cable channel, which was born out of our investors who saw a need for a representation in North America that was not just safaris and the poverty and the strife that you see enough of on BBC or CNN for that matter. So we are primarily a lifestyle entertainment channel, linear channel that sits on cable networks in North America. And I must say it has been quite a challenge for us, because for the longest time, we've been in about 6 million homes. But as of March this year, that's doubled to 12 million homes in North America. So, and in light of the growth of the business, about 5 years ago, we've diversified in two key aspects of bridging that gap. One is the launch of our OTT platforms, which sit as an SVOD subscription VOD platform, as well as fast channels called Demand Africa. And our SVOD platform is available globally, and our fast channels are starting to really take off on the ground. Once again, primarily in North America. We've just launched in Brazil as a Portuguese channel, once again celebrating African content around the world. And when I say African content, a lot of that has been licensed out of Africa, but we also look for that immigrant narrative, diaspora narrative from other parts of the world, including North America. And then, of course, the other business that has been born out of the Africa channel is Tax Studios, which is the one that I'm particularly excited about, because I sort of oversee that. And Tax Studios looks after the acquisitions and the curation of the content that sits on those platforms that I just mentioned, as well as development of original IP. And not necessarily for the Africa channel, because the network is still small in comparison to the big players like the Disneys and the Amazons and the Netflixes of the world. But to identify IP and stories or source material that lends itself and speaks to audiences outside of the continent of Africa. So yeah,
that's a great mission, and I wanted to throw in a few things about my recent experiences at the Cannes Film Festival, and see what you guys think about these things that were occurring there. It was a historic year with Spike Lee as the president of the jury. It was he was not only the president of the jury but also the symbol of the festival this year. I felt, as an attendee, this was the smallest attendance ever, and it was at about 30%. But what was remarkable this year was that the amount of Black people from all around the world that were there, and that was manifested in programming, in people doing business, and people pushing, and really moving sort of through this chaotic moment and redefining what it means to be in film. Do you guys feel? And anyone can jump in on this question. Do you guys feel that this sort of battle between film and television is even a real battle? One, and then what sort of opportunities do you see in this sort of chaotic moment for filmmakers who are working in the African American diaspora space? Samad, do you want to comment there?
Well, I think it's important to, first of all, I hate the word filmmaker. I'll tell you, and I'll tell you why. Because a filmmaker is not thinking about business, and you can't keep raising money for projects and not pay attention to the business, and keep burning investors. So that's why I prefer it as a content creator, content producer, something that is the word producer. You have a fiduciary responsibility to understand money and understand the end game of the project. So I hope people put that hat on And when you put that hat on, then your conversations will be different. Your eyes will be open differently. You will see things totally different. As a filmmaker, you just want to make your film. But as a content creator, content producer, it's not a matter of film versus TV. It's a matter of developing enough stuff. We have a slate of projects we're doing. We're doing television series. We're doing films. It's not one or the other, because if you think about on the film side, I mean, where are we with theatrical right now? Right? We don't know where that's going to land, and it's not looking
We don't
good.
know.
So then you have television license, you have SVOD, you have VOD. That's where you're going to end up. So you need to make movies at a price range where you can not only recoup the money, but hopefully make some money, and then go on to make the next film. And while you're doing the films, you also concentrate on series, because a lot of platforms, they want stuff. They want more than just film. They want enough content that can keep the eyeballs or keep the subscriptions going, right? So if you're in the business as a content producer, then you're thinking of all these things. You're not thinking about your one film that you want to make so you can go to Cannes or Sundance. You're thinking about, how do you do this as a business? We're in the business, right? Everybody else is making money off of it. You should make money off your creativity and know how to monetize it, understand the end game. So that's why it's important. Words matter. For years we've called ourselves filmmakers, and then every year you're running around trying to raise money all over again. It just sucks. But
Well, yeah, I agree.
as a
I agree with you. I
producer,
think
you
there's
should have a game plan. You should have a game
there's
plan.
got to be sustainable game plan, which means that if you're going to make one film, you might as well make 5. You might as well find a way to make money for your investors, so that becomes a relationship, not a one-off or a hit and run accident where they never want to see you again.
Exactly.
And so how do we
Investors talk to other investors, right? Investors
do.
talk to other investors.
And listen, I've done consulting with filmmakers who've told me that I didn't know what I was talking about, that I'm going to make the movie I want to make, and I'm going to make it for the amount of money I want to make it for, and I'm going to find the investor. I'm like, well, then we should part ways right now. Well, in one instance, the guy got the money he said he wanted, which was $2 million. And he made a movie with unknown people, even though we'd advised him to get, bankable stars. I did not know at the time that what he'd done to get the money was to get his mother to mortgage her house and give him her retirement money. And so this poor woman is now living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Tampa, and his dream is, and her money is tied up in a film that nobody wants to see, because he did not listen to actual business practices. He thought he was going to make stars. I'm like, yeah, well, you do that for $15,000, not $2 million, and you take that risk. But I think that's a question that we have to ask ourselves as a sort of a business. How are we as business people sort of impacting newcomers so that they understand what they're actually getting into? Because our film schools don't actually teach that in most cases.
They don't teach you business. Regular school doesn't teach you business. That's why the words matter. That's why I say words matter. You have to get rid of, and no disrespect to the word filmmaker. I'm making a point. The point is,
I understand.
Filmmaker doesn't lend itself to monetizing a long-term business plan. It just doesn't. It's a one-off kind of thing, and you're happy to go to a film festival. And typically, even those film festival deals are not getting cut. So,
right.
What are you doing?
What are you doing? I mean, listen, there's still a place in the world for film festivals, absolutely. For discovery, for business.
Again, I'm speaking broadly. Of course, of course, we love film festivals. I'm just saying, let's go from film festivals to a real business model where content can continue to be made, and not only do you make the money back, but you also make a profit. And then you can keep going. You can have a lifestyle. Your investors are happy. Everybody's happy, right?
Well, sometimes the answer is right in front of people's eyes. I mean, Cannes sits next to a very great market, and that should be an indication right there. So, hey, Perez.
Yes.
You've also directed. So, what do you want to weigh in on the ideas of of filmmaking in this business, sustainability of those careers, and
for me, the thing that was most helpful for me is before I even made my first film, before I did anything, I worked at Paramount Studios, creative advertising and marketing. And I always tell people that's the best education I ever got, because by the time I got into filmmaking now, I understood the business aspect of it. I understood that when you create something, you have to know what your poster is. You have to know how you're marketing it. You have to know who your audience is. You have to, so for me, everything I do is intentional. And my DP is picked very specifically. Like if I'm shooting a film and I want a female DP, I know exactly why. And is she going to be Colombian? Is she going to be Latino? Why? I want the Latino market. Everything is very specific. Everybody in your team should be going out to market your film in some capacity. It's not longer just, the actor. Everybody. You should understand how this film is going to make not just you money, but it's because for me, here's the thing. What I found out working in the studio, that it's really about rent, food, clothing, shelter, tuition. That's what it's about. So if you have a film and you want to get this film for $3 million, but this film is not going to make $1 million back, basically what you're saying is somebody's not going to get to pay rent, somebody's going to lose their job, some element of the studio or the production company is going to need to close for you to realize this dream. That's not a business.
No.
You have to always realize that there are people behind your dream as well. So that you put a budget that you know that you have a marketing plan that is going to recoup this money back. Because I've been in studios and I've seen people getting laid off at studios because they didn't make the money. They didn't make the profit back. That are actual people being affected by choices that we're making. So I'm always very clear what my budget is. And my budget is always, can I recoup this back for the person who's given me this money? Because as you said, it's not about your first film. It's about your 10th film. It's about your 15th show. That's what it's about your career. That's what you're working on. You're working on, I'm going to be in business with people. That's what it is. So
Yes.
what do people need? They don't want their jobs shutting down and people getting laid off, So there's a human cost. And I always walk in with a human, because I've had a project that they wanted to make the budget so high. I said, I cannot do this film with you because I don't understand how we're going to recoup this money back. If you're going to produce my film, you've got to tell me how we're recouping this. Because if you can't tell me that, then we're becoming a liability. We're no longer an asset. And
Exactly.
especially for us, people of color, we've got to make money. But it's not just us. Come on now, James Cameron is out here getting movies because James Cameron is making money. It's really it.
Yeah.
It's really it. They're making money.
Now, question: does anybody believe that? I mean, there's no longer really an A-list star system anymore. So what do people base their decision making on when it comes to greenlighting a show or a film? Brendan, what's your take on that?
So look, I mean, today, because of social media and all of those kinds of platforms, one has to really consider those aspects of casting and talent. Whether it's even from a back end sort of production side of thing. There's a lot of talent on other platforms that are starting to seep into mainstream. So we consider those kinds of things as well. And then, of course, as we all, I think, agree on this, it's all about the business and connecting the dots to the money. So, I mean, if you got to take calculated risks. And of course, the sort of bigger players like the Disney Pluses of the world and the Amazons, I'm sure want to have attachments of big names. But if you're sitting with really strong IP and strong creative and strong source material, I think maybe it balances it out to have a look at new talent and discovering new talent and giving them a platform also. So it's all about the balance, as well as who you pitching to. Who are you asking for that $20 million per episode from at the end of the day? Connect the dots, as they say.
Now, I have a question with regards to that too, because I've been out pitching a lot this year, thankfully. And one of the things that is also been indicative about what people are buying, what people want to buy, is the climate we're living in. Because right now, if you wanted to sell a movie about a serial killer or something, you'd be hard pressed to get somebody to buy that. because right now, because of COVID and all that stuff, we are in such a position of such angst and emotional fatigue that people are looking for the Ted Lassos of the world, something to make people. I watched Ted Lasso 5 times. I didn't even know I needed a Ted Lasso until I turned it on. And I was like, oh my God, I have so much stress. This is what I needed to be watching. So I think that it's not necessarily about the A-listers as much as what's going on in people's lives right now. What are people hungering for? And that's what's going to determine what rises to the top. And that's a matter of luck sometimes, because you can't know what's going to happen in 2025.
You don't know.
Because
you don't know.
You don't know.
There is a luck factor, but to that point, I wanted to sort of put this to Samad and Perez. How do you bridge and actually for all three of you, really, when you're thinking about international content, it's a very different. Is it different now to sort of take something that's very local, something that's set, say, in a small village in Kenya, but make it a story that I can understand in Kansas or in Buenos Aires? How do you approach material from an international point of view these days?
Well, I'll say this. I have a series that we produced with my local partners, the Fergusons, here in South Africa. It's called Kings of Joburg. It's on Netflix globally, right? And again, as we develop, it's a South African story about a family and who's mixed into some underworld activities in Johannesburg, right? But then we say, okay, wait a minute. So I'm in Johannesburg and there's everybody here. There's Nigerians here, there are Russians here, there are Americans here, there's a little bit of everyone is in Joburg, right? So I said, well, let's look at during Africa, let's definitely incorporate Nigeria. Let's also figure out how can we, story-wise, incorporate some Americans so that therefore, once we release this thing, we have Nigeria behind us because it's a big market. We have the US behind us because, oh, wow, some people we know are in a series in Africa and it's good. This is bridging the gap, right? Because again, we've grown up in America watching all the negative aspects of stereotypical aspects of Africa, right? So we don't know. So anytime Americans can see themselves in something that's shot in Africa and is really good, you have an audience there to say, wow, wait a minute, Africa looks like that? Because they're watching it because there's people that they know in it. And then they get to be introduced into South Africa or Africa. So however we need to get them there, we've got them there. And so that series performed so well. We're already doing a season 2 of it, by the way. We were able to gauge numbers in South Africa, Nigeria, the US, Jamaica, UK. So it's interesting, this model of trying to put a little bit of everybody in organically. Don't force it. But if it works story-wise, try it, because what happens is a platform like Netflix or any other platform, they're all about the metrics, right? They want to see, they can tell you if it's 6 episodes, they can tell you if somebody stopped watching episode 2. And then it's a big difference if they watch all the way through 6 episodes or 8 episodes, and they know people are watching this. This series is successful because people are watching it all the way through. And so you it's a case study. You try to do something that's developed. I'm from America, so I'm going to say it's developed overseas, which where I'm at right now is in South Africa. But you still incorporate these different elements, and then you put it out in the market, and you see the response, and you're like, wait a minute, okay, this formula works. People want to see more of that. And I just think it's just very important to do so, because in our daily lives, we come across people from everywhere, right? Why can't we tell stories like that? So
yeah. And in addition to what you're saying, in addition to casting, because casting is really a great way to bring in the market, it's kind of a business way of doing it. Also, just basically, come on, at the end of the day, humans are human beings. A gun is the same thing in South Africa. It looks the same way in South Africa as it does in Russia, as it does in Mexico. It's the same damn thing. Love looks the same. People making love is going to be done the same exact way. So there's this idea that if somebody's in a different place, they don't relate. No, if you lose a family member, you cry. Everybody cries. If you get cut, you cry. We are human beings, and human beings respond to the same emotions. We respond to the same triggers. We have the same emotions. So that there is no, and I think that once we come, because I'm right now obsessed with Korean TV shows. I think they're phenomenal. I watched some epic shows and I'm just crying like, oh my God. And I'm a Kenyan living in the United States, responding to Korean film. The human aspect of it should never be forgotten. That we all, come on, the whole world watched Black Panther. Sit with that, right?
Yeah.
So it's tell a good story, use whoever you have and who's good, and we will relate to it.
Yeah,
I really think so.
Brendan, you
I'd like, yeah, I'd like to add to that. So yes, I totally see Samad's angle where you have an access point to
Yes.
an audience through character, right? And then of course there's there's a reality of how, as you've just mentioned, where content bleeds into different territories, which is why we have successes like Made in Heaven, Indian Matchmaking, Elite, Unorthodox, which are all not necessarily movies out of Hollywood or series out of Hollywood, and are from maybe emerging markets or from Europe. In fact, Elite
right.
is in Spanish, and there we are watching
I binged
all
it.
4 seasons. You know,
Yes,
exactly.
it's a crazy show.
Yeah, and I think that all connects to, I think, working on the craft, writing compelling characters that are relatable. I think if characters remain authentic, maybe you don't need Tom Cruise as the lead. You know, it speaks for itself. And that's what we see in these iterations of the shows that I just mentioned now that work globally. You know, and that's very much our mandate as a studio as well, is, you know, the IP that we look for. It could be a hyper-local story out of Africa, but if there are interesting characters with layers and doing phenomenal things, I think those stories can translate.
Yeah, to your
I'd
point,
like to
let's just
add.
talk about money.
Okay.
Let's just talk about Money Heist. Money Heist. This was not
Yes.
even at the height
There
of
we go.
COVID. Not even at the height
There we
of
go.
COVID. This Money Heist. Who didn't just zoom into this very Spanish story? And then you watch this. And the thing about that that's really fantastic is you watch Money Heist and you're watching Tokyo. And what they did brilliantly is there's a character called Nairobi. I'm from Nairobi. So I'm feeling a little bit like, oh yeah, there's Detroit, there's Helsinki. It's brilliant. And then you start to look at these actors. Then you go, well, what else have they done? Now you're starting to watch Spanish content. Because now because they're in Elite too. 2 of them are in Elite, right? 2 of these actors are in, and that's how it happens. Is you find one entry point, and then people just spread in, because now they're curious.
Yeah, no, it's a
I'll
phenomenal
just
thing, and
add.
I'd full. Oh, please go ahead, Samad.
No, I was going to say, I mean, the pandemic will never be the same. So people had a chance to sit down and be still. And we relied. If there was none of these streaming platforms,
Yeah.
the world would have really went to hell. Okay? So to be able to sit down and watch shows that you would not normally watch, and then you say, wait a minute, this is really good. So our viewing habits have changed. And we're comfortable with watching a blockbuster be released on Amazon, like Tomorrow's War, right? We're comfortable now doing that. So theatrical I don't know where that's going to land, but the pandemic has changed people's viewing habits forever. I totally believe that. And then I will also say, with the emergence of all these different platforms, there is no better time in the history of this business to be a content producer, especially independent. There's no better time, because typically the model was, okay, so you have a deal with a studio, those people have their deals, great. And there's the rest of us running around trying to do stuff and go to film festivals, right? But now those budgets are not the same. Those people who are used to the studio system, they don't know they're fish out of water now, because now the game has changed. You're out here with the rest of us. So everybody's looking for content. Everybody has to feed the machine. Every platform has to feed the machine. Netflix, Amazon, the smaller ones, the Africa channel, everybody's looking for stuff to feed this machine, because people want to watch stuff straight through and they're running out of content. So once people realize, hey, let me put my content producer hat on, let me figure out a model, let me make stuff at a price that I know I can monetize it, and let me just keep feeding all these platforms. I'm inundated right now with every platform and channel asking for content. What do we have? We got deals here, deals there, Stomach Production, license deals everywhere. There's no better time. I
No, I
assure
agree with
you,
you.
because now people are open to deals differently,
Well, I think
doing deals
There's
streamers have.
differently
something
than they normally would.
I have
Yes, please.
a question. I wanted to see if anybody else has witnessed this because we're talking about film and TV right now. Is I have a friend of mine who has been saying this is not the first time she said it. She said it twice, and she said that she has become, because of the whole COVID experience, she's now fallen in love with a specific type of storytelling, limited series. That she really like that specific thing is what now she loves. She's like, and she'd say like, now I feel like if I watch a movie, it's not believable that all these things can happen in like an hour. So she's, and then like I don't want it to be more than 5 seasons either. Like I'm loving the limit. So she's really keeps honing in because she knows I'm a content creator. It's like, I'm really liking this limited series. Like, go tell somebody to keep this thing right here. So it's really interesting how people, as you said, people's viewing habits have changed.
They've changed tremendously, and it's interesting. Dialing back to Money Heist, and full disclosure, I do represent 2 of the actors on that show, so I'm a little in favor of it. I have Berlin and Marseille, but the that show was interesting because it was just an acquisition. It was put on the network, it sat there, and it organically found its own audience, and then it became this phenom on a slow burn. It was not calculated; it just happened. The number 2 show on Netflix right now globally is Fauda, which is half Hebrew, half Arabic, which, in Hollywood's terms, they never would have pushed anything like that beyond its quote unquote natural audience. And certainly when it comes to African content, we're starting to see shows like yours, Samad, and all these things that are happening now that are finding audiences. And I think the phenomenal thing about being on a streamer is the internet impact as well. You just don't know what people are going to find fascinating and build their own world around, and become obsessed with. So I think there's a huge opportunity, and I think it also speaks to what is possible in terms of marketing. Because now, if you're on a streamer, you can market to the entire globe. You don't have to have a Tom Cruise we keep referencing. We don't even make those kinds of people anymore. But I do think there's a chance for someone who's ambitious to take their push and go as far as they can with it. I think it's a tremendous time.
To your point, Stephen, I have watched Fauda, all of it. I've ingested so much foreign content, and I'm so grateful for it. Right now, I'm in love with this show called Young Royals. It's out of Norway. It's LGBTQ, and it's just, I don't know. Every time I go into Netflix, I'm introduced to a new part of the world, and it's something beautiful about that. And I know HBO is also starting to do that, where content is content. And I think there's a responsibility for it to be more than just, hey, we're going to go out here, we're making money, but we're also going to give you the world. And I think there's something beautiful about that, about being in the United States and figuring out what's happening in India, content-wise, what's going on in South Africa, in Kenya. Oh my God, it's a show. I've watched movies from Chile, Colombia. I mean, it's Thailand. I was watching a soap from Thailand. And there's something beautiful about just putting the world in all our hands, so that when we go out there, we become just a little bit less racist.
I think you're right. I think it's actually given us all a chance to be, the curious, respectful, people that we want to be. Hollywood has made a lot of decisions about what people will and will not do. I mean, I remember not that long ago being at Sundance, being told in a lab by distributors that films with black leads did not play overseas. And we're seeing now that is an absolute lie. It is, people make their choices based on the quality of the content, and that's the only litmus I'm seeing there. So Brendan, the Africa channel is expanding. How are you opening up more channels for producers to come in and find their way to you, and then work through all the opportunities that are opening up now?
Interesting question. So, initially we would back in the olden days, Steve, pre-COVID,
5 years ago.
yeah, we used to really hit the markets hard, to access writers and talent and things like that. And I think in the first iterations, especially of the studio over the last 4 years, has allowed us to connect with people, and we find now, especially during COVID, we've been able to connect with really, really phenomenal people, and creativity. I think maybe the pause that the pandemic had placed on all of us and pushing us back into our homes and working from homes and just stopping for a minute allowed um, people to access us, whether it's through our website, through submissions, as well as us also connecting with people online. And then the interesting thing about that is also connecting with writers and showrunners in the US and the UK who are also now a little less busy than they were, and opening themselves up and being available to work with and collaborate with us on writing projects. So yeah, it's been a very interesting, I'd say, year, at least, and we hope that this is the beginning of a really important time in terms of growth, especially for our own personal slate. We've got projects that are coming out of Africa, partnerships and projects that have been developed out of the UK. We're working with Akemji, who was the BAFTA-winning showrunner on Famalam. And all of a sudden, we're connected to all of these people. And so it just shows also, we've all been complaining about the pandemic and sitting at home, but I think it's really been the best incubation time for us, and the ability for all of us to stop the noise. Maybe all the events we were going to was creating way too much noise, sitting down and allowing us to actually have meaningful connections with each other.
No, that's fantastic, and I think it's a great response to a very difficult moment. And through all that, what can you specify the mandate? Is there a specific mandate of things you're looking for right now? What flips the switch?
Yeah. So I think as a studio, we're looking primarily for IP, whether that's in the form of a script, a really well thought out treatment or idea, or even source material like a book, that has the potential for us to develop that further for the international market, right? The core focus is something out of Africa or African influenced. But second to that, we are also very open to diverse IP. So IP that comes from other emerging markets that we feel could connect into that global content mandate. And then, of course, so when we look at these things, what we look at from a studio is who could we partner, especially with emerging writers and from emerging markets, who could we partner these projects with, whether it's the likes of the Samads of the world or the Kevin Harts, or we look at these projects from connecting the dots, the business dots, which is also a point that Samad mentioned, is how are you going to get that funding? How are you going to make that money back and get that IP off the ground? So everyone's got an idea, but we look for ideas that we either know on the ground that networks are looking for this kind of content, that we know other studios who have first look deals are looking for this IP, take it, develop it further, package it, and then start hitting the market to connect those money dots to get it off the ground.
I love it.
Yeah. And then, Steve,
please.
Just to add to that, as far as genre is concerned, we pretty much look at all of it we don't see ourselves as filmmakers. We see ourselves as content makers. Whatever the platform, if there's a platform for it to go on, and there's an audience hungry to see this, and if the characters speak to audiences, we're open to look at these kinds of things.
You guys are going to get us in trouble with filmmakers. You know that.
No,
No,
we
no, no,
love
no, no.
filmmakers.
But
No, no, no.
I'm
We just
teasing.
want them to.
I'm teasing.
We're all filmmakers. I consider myself a filmmaker. I do. I consider myself a filmmaker and a storyteller. It's just also in the process of being a filmmaker and a storyteller, we're also business people. So just, we make calculated risk. At least the good ones who have
Absolutely.
a career that is sustained, make
Well,
calculated
talk. I
risks.
mean, I think
Yeah.
Samad and Perez. I mean, let's drill into that with both of you. I mean, you guys are very hybrid in many ways. You are people who've directed, you produce, you create with other people. I mean, and you know how to market, you know how to do this business. When did that light go off for you, Perez? When you said, "Oh, wait a minute, these things need to connect, not be. They're not on separate polarities."
For me, it happened when I was at Paramount Pictures because it was being in the marketing department was fascinating because what you had to do is you'd have to sit and watch all these big movies. I mean, we're watching Iron Man, Transformers, we're watching all these big movies and you have to sit there and figure out how to cut a trailer for this. So we'd be there for hours. I mean, it was like long days. You're there from 8 to like midnight. You're watching Star Trek and you keep watching it over and over and over. And you're picking moments, because this film has to open, right? That's the term. We have to open this film. And you're picking musical scores and you're putting it underneath and that doesn't work. And then you're looking at you're taking posters and you're doing all this all these photo shoots and you're doing poster takes and you're sending them to filmmakers and they're bringing them back. And it's the process of that alone. And it's that point when I realized, good God, this is a business. This is making the movie is not where it ends. Opening the movie is really where it's at. So it was also learning because we had some movies that were really hard for us to crack. And that's where the light bulb went off. Try to make it easier for your marketing team. Give them things they can work with. Because as being a person sitting in marketing going like, I can't open, there's some movies we'd watch and we'd be like, oh my God, just the premise alone is already, how are we going to sell this? And then you begin to see that the films that are easier to open, there's something in them. The filmmakers have put something in that story that just kind of sort of rises above, and then you're like, okay, we can grab this, and you make a trailer. And then I was talking, there's some people I can't name right now because, they're all Me Too'd, but, I've sat and gotten
Is there
wisdom
anybody
from
left
some
in
of,
Hollywood?
I've gotten wisdom from some really, I don't even know how to describe them anymore. Some people who used to be really big hitters in the business. And if you listen to them, I remember once I was talking to one of them and I said, oh, I want to do this movie. And he looked at me and he said, do you want a career? I said, yes. He said, then you don't start with this one. I said, what do you mean? He said, you start with the thing that makes the most money. That's how you become $1 billion director. And I just was like, oh, wow. He said, yeah. And then then I started reading, you start to hear all the things like George Clooney, he's even straight up talked about it. He said, I had to do Ocean's 11 to do Syriana. I had to do Ocean's 13 to do Good Night and Good Luck. So they're telling you, because even didn't Spielberg say that? Spielberg had to do Jurassic Park to do Schindler's List. They've been telling you all along that there's a formula here. You got to show people you can give them money for them to give you more money to do your quote unquote, your passion project, so
Now,
just
one of the
pay
most
attention.
fascinating. Yeah, absolutely. It's all there in front of you. One of the most fascinating talks I ever witnessed was Tom Cruise discussing his career as a producer. And he talked about how when he was in his 20s, he had put into his contract that he would have control over the marketing of his films. He went through something called the Paramount University where they put him in the marketing department for months where he sat with them doing what you're talking about. He learned sausages were really made. It's like, it isn't just about what happens on the camera. It's about the whole process. And actually, the fact of the matter is, if you can't come up with a marketing campaign, you don't have a project. And it was interesting to hear him talk about that because that guy is probably, still one of the last of a breed, but he's there for a reason. It's because he understands the mechanics of this business and knows how to use them in a way that few people do, and is not afraid to make that a part of his life, and it does not make him less of an artist. In fact, it gives him more opportunities than ever.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. But Samad, do you want to weigh in on this whole idea of the hybrid nature of what you've done and how these things have connected for you?
For me, I come from a long line of entrepreneurs in my family. So it's in my DNA. I see everything through the lens of ownership, how to make it happen, build it as you fly it. So because I'm naturally wired that way, I'm always putting pieces of the puzzle together. And when you talk about film and the marketing, anything that you're going to try to monetize in any business, it has the same set of principles. We just got so used to thinking it's all about the creative that this seems like it's new. It's not. If we want to sell ice cream, we got to think of the marketing. Who are we marketing it to? We want to build a new house, a housing complex. Who are our clients? Are we pre-selling this? How much are we leasing? Are we leasing some of these? Are we selling them outright? It's the same concept. It's just business. So my entrepreneur hat mixed with my people skills, I'm constantly connecting the dots. That's what I do all day. And you sprinkle a little creativity on that, and voila. So it's not new. It's just that we're now tapping into the fact that, oh wait, this is a business beyond the studios and then big networks. There is an opportunity for me to actually have a business model created within this space. So once you understand that, it's just if you go to any business school or have a mentor that teaches you business, it's the same rules.
Yeah.
There it is.
Really?
And Brendan, how does TAC collaborate with other platforms?
How do we collaborate with other platforms in terms of distributing content
Distributing and in terms of creating and taking things to them? I mean, how are you
Oh,
set up
yeah.
to do that?
Sure. So when we identify content and just, building up from what we had just discussed now, we always look at the IP that we are developing with writers and with showrunners to connecting the dots to who can we sell this to. The first question when you read that, if it's a great script, wow, I cried, or the pace was amazing and these characters are phenomenal, where do you see it, right? I think that is the thing that connects you to the networks. And so we would just basically make sure that whatever we create and develop is packaged, has the right kinds of attachments. We make sure that we put our best foot forward. I mean, craft in the creativity. If you know you can see it on Disney Plus or Amazon, make sure you bring the best of the best to them, because I think today we no longer, as South African producers pitching to just South African networks, we're no longer just competing with our local people, but we're competing with the Jane Camerons of the world and the Kevin Harts and the Will Smiths and all of these people who are also creating content and pitching it to the networks. So how do you stand out, right? And so we pretty much open game as a studio to connect with other networks as a studio, producing content for them, original content. And yeah, I suppose, as long as the formula is right, as long as you know that this is something that will sit on the platform, as long as you got a damn hot script to go with it and a good showrunner, got nothing to lose, really.
I love it. We've got about a minute left, so let's get into one final conversation about the future of OTT and distribution, I mean, things are we're sort of in a massive reorganization right now, and everybody's competing now on the streaming level, and there were many were slow to the game, but now everybody's in it, and we're seeing this nuclear arms race right now. So what are your predictions about the next era that we're entering right now? Anybody want to take that? Please.
I do. I want to take it. First of all, I have a distribution company here in South Africa. So we aggregate for a lot of different platforms globally. We distribute. But we have 3 films that we're about to release as an NFT. That's where we're going.
Wow.
Sounds crazy, but that's happening right now. Right now. It's not in theory. As you know, I don't know if you know where everything is going with crypto, right? You can order food from the Chinese restaurant. You can pay in crypto. That's now, right? Okay, but that's NFT is also moving in that direction and is now moving in that direction with content, film and television content.
Love
and
it.
That's where
Anyone
that's
else?
so now what happens now? That's a game changer.
You push us into another frontier.
Total game changer. This is happening right now. This is in real time.
Amazing.
So
we've got a few seconds left. I love it. Any final comments before we wrap up?
Oh no, I just want to say I couldn't predict COVID. I couldn't predict 2020 or 2021, let alone what's going to happen. Anything. I just sit back and live.
And 2022 is anybody's guess as well.
Who knows? Yes.
And Brendan?
Well, let's just see how the cycle works. You know, there were many. Once upon a time, there were many networks, and then they were all lapped up by the big 5. So, who's going to be the big 5 of digital as we move into that space? I suppose. You know, I've got my eye on that. As you know, in this game, it's all about mergers and acquisitions. Who's buying who out where? So very interested to see how it's all going to be. Right now, it's quite fragmented, and it's everyone and their grandmother has an OTT platform. But how are these all going to come together in the 5 subscriptions that we probably have to pay in the future versus the 25 that we're paying now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
A brave new world ahead of us. Well, thank you all very much for your insight and your time. I appreciate you all. And back to you, Dana.
Thank you so very much, Stephen, and to all of our panelists. I love that over the last 2 days, that constant theme of the importance of connectivity and leaning into your truth and leaning into your story. Just these conversations have been amazing. Next up, we will peel back the curtain on the writer's room for yet another great conversation. Leading showrunners will share their experiences, insights, and advice on how to successfully navigate a writer's room. For what it takes to be hired on staff, to what it takes to become invaluable to the room, and how to move up. Following the live panel, there will be audience Q&A. Again, use those Q&A functions right there at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions, and we'll get to as many questions as we possibly can. Leading our next panel, we have Director, CBS Diversity Writers Mentoring Program, and Director, WGA Showrunner Training Program, and author of a fabulous book loaded with practical advice titled Hollywood Game Plan, How to Land a Job in Film, TV, and Digital Entertainment, the one and only. Please give a warm welcome to Carol Kirshner.
Thanks, Dana. I appreciate that. Anyways, hello and welcome. We have a great panel today that is going to give a look inside the writer's room. We are very fortunate to have 3 esteemed showrunners with us who are going to share their experience, insights, and wisdom. First, Nichelle Tramble-Spellman. Sorry, Nichelle. Dana Lynn North and Alexander Wu. Since you have their bios and we have limited period of time, I'm going to jump right into our questions. So starting with you, Dana, can you briefly tell us what you're working on now and how you got into your first writer's room?
Sure. I am currently co-creating and co-show running the Best Man the final chapters, a limited series that is in development at Peacock with Malcolm D. Lee. Malcolm and I, who, he currently has a little movie called Space Jam that's in theaters, and he created that old thing. And Malcolm wrote the Best Man movies that are beloved, The Best Man and The Best Man Holiday, and we are, for Peacock, we are doing a limited series of the next the next chapter, as we're calling the final chapters. So I'm in that room, and I'm also developing a number of projects with and an overall deal at Sony Pictures that I'm super excited about. So I have a number of things that are, in various phases with them that I'm, in the lab on with different writers. So that's what I'm up to currently. And then my first show was Any Day Now on Lifetime, and I had that route that I really value so much because it serves me very well now, which we'll talk about later, which was that I went from being a writer's assistant to a writer on Any Day Now. Nancy Miller, the creator of that show, gave me my break. I was in the writer's room on Any Day Now, and then I went on to write freelance scripts and become a writer. So that was my first room.
That's
And
great.
hello,
That
everyone.
is, and hello, that is absolutely a trajectory to get into a writer's room. Nichelle, what are you working
Yeah.
on now? What have you been working on? And how did you get into your first room?
Well, I created a show for Apple called Truth Be Told, starring Octavia Spencer, and season 1 came out 2 years ago. Season 2 premieres on August 20th, and this year it is Octavia Spencer and Kate Hudson, and they're wonderful together. And just starting the room for season 3. And what's taken up most of my time are 2 feature projects, one for Netflix starring Kerry Washington, which is going to be fun. It's the kind of movie I miss in the theaters, and a project for MGM about Jimi Hendrix. So I got into television by going through the CBS Writers Program in 2007 with you, Carol. And then I was staffed on Women's Murder Club right at the end of that. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Great. And how did you get staffed on that? Was it through the program or was it another way?
Gosh, it's so long ago. I feel like it was the program. I left the program early, and it was through an agent meeting. Now I remember.
There you go.
Yeah, I left the program about 2 weeks before we were all wrapped up.
Yeah, you were a rock star because you got staffed before the program was over. Alexander Wu, talk to us. What are you doing now, and how'd you get into your first room?
Hi, Carol. What I mainly do with my life is I'm mainly a housekeeper and Zoom tutor, and in my spare time I make TV shows. When you have 2 small children, that's my main job. I'm over at Netflix, and I'm the co-creator of a science fiction project called The 3-Body Problem with David Benioff and Dan Weiss, and there should be some casting announcements coming out soon, so that should be very exciting. And about to head on over to start pre-production very soon as well. Actually, pre-production starting. I'm about to go join them.
Where?
And in the UK.
Oh,
so,
okay. Travel.
Quite far away. And then the other, I'm also developing another project of my own that is about ultra-rich mainland Chinese living in the San Gabriel Valley and boba. So that's the other thing. I got my first job, a million years ago, 2003. I had a play in New York. I started as a playwright and was doing that I was in theater for 7 years for no other reason than because I loved it. It gave me joy to do. Certainly wasn't in it for the money because there was none. And I had a play that I can't say it did well. I can't claim it did well because it didn't do well, but it did get a very nice review in the New York Times. And that helped me get my first staff job, which is a show called Wonder Falls. So my first bosses were Brian Fuller and Tim Minear and Todd Holland, which is a pretty good start.
Wow. That is great. That is great. Yeah. Television, just so people know, they love playwrights. They love playwrights. So if you're a playwright, have a great play that an agent or manager or executive can help you get in the hands of a showrunner. Okay, Nichelle, as a showrunner, what are you looking for when you read a script to hire a lower level staff writer? And then how is it different for an upper level staff writer? What makes a script just sing?
Well, I think I'm looking for really good character work from all samples, whether it's upper level or lower level. On Truth Be Told, even though there is a murder mystery at the base of it, it's really a family drama, crime drama. So I really need people who can spend a moment with the characters, are not afraid of emotion. That's a big deal for me. And when I'm talking to upper level writers, it's really about what they can handle. Are you good in post? Can you take over casting? Can you run the room if I have to step away? Those kind of functional things, that's really what I'm looking for, in addition to good writing with the upper levels. And with the lower levels, it's a voice and a point of view and something that just cracks a little different on the page. I think that I had come back to speak at the CBS program and met Joseph Sawyer the year he was in, and he had a 1 hour drama about Mike Tyson at 14. And I just thought, that's interesting to me. You know, that's like different from a procedural or a medical drama, which I also enjoy, but it just gave me insight into where his brain cracks and what he was interested in. And so that felt like something that I could take advantage of in the room because his character work was so strong. So that's the baseline for everything when I do the hiring.
Great. And let me just ask you, because people ask me this all the time. What is it on the page? I understand now that the concept is important. It should be something that just tweaks your interest. But what on the page sort of specifically gets you excited?
When you make unusual choices. And I think that, and by that, I don't mean razzle dazzle. I don't mean a car chase. I don't mean, guns coming out. I think if you make interesting emotional choices in a scene or with the characters and something kind of unexpected. If I'm following along what's the movie on HBO Max or this limited series? It's a Sin. I loved that limited series, and he made unusual emotional choices all the way through. Anything that you thought was going to happen because you'd seen it before, and it wasn't big fireworks, it was just an emotional honesty he followed all the way through. And that's interesting to me, and not running away from emotion. If there's a scene that's heartbreaking and you're sad, it doesn't need to be cut through with a joke. Just kind of having the confidence on the page to stand behind any choice you're making for your characters or for the plot. And it's hard to explain, but when you read it and you could recognize it when you're reading it, and that's it.
Great. Thank you. Alex, what do you look for in a script from a lower level writer that gets you excited?
Well, as Nichelle mentioned, for a lower level writer, really all you're looking for is what's on the page. You don't have any expectations for that person to run the room or be on set or in post yet. At this stage of their careers. I don't want to repeat everything that Nichelle said, but that's very much what I'm looking for too. There's a confidence that you can tell. There is a work that is sharp and makes choices that, because we've read tons and tons of scripts in our lives by this point, choices that surprise me, dialogue that surprises me, but also, the script is, at this point in the process, the script is the only thing you have. There is no cinematographer, there are no costume designers, there's no production designers. So the writer of the script has to do that in script as well, through the pacing of the descriptions, through parentheticals, whatever it may be, through, if you can suggest it through dialogue. I mean, there are things that you can do to suggest the tone and the world without having you have to read an instruction book, because that also slows down the pace of the read. So there is the thing I think that you can tell when a script really excites me is you can feel the joy. I can feel someone is really having a good time writing it, and it doesn't have to be a comedy. They just are. They're in the zone. They feel good about what they're writing, and you can tell because there's a confidence to it. They're not making safe decisions, not making safe choices all the time, not relying on cliches, not falling back on things. That's usually what I'm looking for, which is why I'm in a minority here, and controversially, I really, really don't like books on screenwriting. And I really, really don't like courses on screenwriting too. Someone is going to have probably get very mad at me for that, because often you will go to peek for one eye off the road just to make sure you're doing the right thing, and then you start to write from a place of less confidence and a little bit of fear. And I think for people who have read scripts their whole lives, you can tell that, and often.
Interesting.
Often a book on screenwriting is more crippling than freeing, and that's my caution against it.
I love that. Dana, what do you think about that?
No, I think that's a great point. And actually, while we're wading into potentially controversial waters, I was trying to think of like what could I possibly add to all the great things that have been said on this topic. And the only thing I think I could add is like I'm looking for a script that engages me so much from a lower level writer in particular, on top of all of the great things that I completely co-sign, a script that it grabs me so much that I want to finish it. Because I think the one unsaid thing is that, right, we're reading a lot of stuff. There's the whole often there's that thing that if I'm looking at 5 pages, 10 pages, 15 pages, it doesn't take long to feel like, okay, how much more of this do I want to read? How much more of this do I need to read? Is this script so good that I'm feeling like, wow, I really want to keep going. Wow, something about these surprises, this dialogue, the flow of this, the story they decided to tell is making me go, I really want to keep going. Like, I'm looking for that. I'm looking for a script that pulls me in for all the reasons that have been stated so much that I want to keep going, because there are a lot of scripts that you get to page 10 and you don't feel compelled to keep going. So I'm looking for that as well.
That is great. Now, let me ask you this, just so people have a sense of what we're talking about. How many scripts, and just chime in, do you read for a position during the season? How many scripts? How big is your pile of scripts? Anybody?
It varies so much. And for so many reasons, I don't even know how to answer that, because it depends on a lot of things. I'm thinking.
Okay.
Season 1, I think I read way more than I did for season 2, because there were writers that were coming back. And season 1, it was staffing the entire room. So I think season 1, it was over 60 for sure.
Oh man.
Per position? Yeah. Per position?
Oh, no. Oh, just total, it was over 60 at least total, because I'm trying to remember that graph form that I used to make notes. But I think on an average, probably about 12 to 15 per position. And that's sometimes because the recommendations are, the samples are coming in from agents, but then there's a writer friend that says, hey, take a look at this writer. I know you're staffing up. So it just kind of, it feels like it keeps going and it keeps flowing, even if you have a specific reading period.
Okay.
Yeah,
Alex,
that's what I mean.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was going to say between 10 and 20.
I'm sorry. I was just.
I'm sorry. Okay, so Alex is 10 and 20.
That's about right.
Dana?
Yeah,
okay.
I think this most recently, I would say that's about right. I would say anywhere from, mine was probably somewhere between, about 8 to 15. I don't think it was quite as high as 20 this last time. This room was a little smaller. I feel like it was probably a little under 20, but anywhere from, something like that. 8 to 15 or so, which is a wide number. I know it varied because some positions we read fewer, some we read more, that type of thing. But
But this is to say this is after it's gone through a process of usually when there's multiple people who can read scripts, it gets whittled down, and the studio might have some people that they really, really like, and other producers might have people they really, really like. And then by the time you get to your core group, the most senior writers on the team usually will get together and find, okay, this is the group that we should really all consider and read. So when there's more people, at the top to help out, then there's fewer scripts that we all, we have to go through. If it's just me, it can be a very large number.
Yeah. With Hello Sunshine, they're the producers on Truth Be Told, and they do a lot of the initial reading for me. And then I had a showrunner's assistant who really knew my taste and would whittle down from their pile.
Okay. Yeah.
Same here.
It's a lot. It is a lot of scripts, and you have to, anyone that wants to get into the room, you have to stand out from all those scripts. Okay, so you love the script. You set up an interview. What makes an interview great, and what makes an interview suck? Let's start with the mistakes. People always learn from mistakes. What did somebody do in an interview that you went, this is over? Alex? A bad interview that you had with a
I don't know if anyone's ever done something that really makes me completely shut down. I'll say it is highly subjective because everyone's going to have a totally different answer depending on who you're interviewing with. I think by the time you get to the point of an interview, the showrunner has read the material, so the work is good. That's not the point. The subtext of any of these conversations is, can I spend the next potentially next few months or years of my life with this person? And how does this person fit with everyone else that we have on the team? So that is highly subjective. I know several very close friends and colleagues who really, really want passion, deep passion, and deep commitment. Really, really want to do it because I'm allegedly emotionally dead inside. That I don't like that as much. That's what they say. I think I feel things, but how would I know, right? I think, admittedly, a little more clinical when I approach things. I think I do write things that are very emotional, but if I myself get emotional, I know someone who's a showrunner who loves it when everyone cries in the room, and I would be horrified if everyone was crying in the room. I would feel like it's gone terribly wrong if in the breaking of a story we all start breaking down in tears. So I have a different set of things that I respond to. I love enthusiasm. Right. One of the things that really speaks to me is when someone says, "I want to do this show. I want to do this project because this is really the things that on the other side might just be like, I just want to get a job. I'll take any job." That tends to give me less confidence that they're going to, be someone who's really committed to wanting to do this particular show.
Sure. Dana, anybody that shot themselves in the foot that you can share so that we know what not to do?
I'm thinking about that. I mean, yes to passion. I agree with having that sense of, for me, I want to know that someone has a sense of emotional maturity. So it's also, I want to know that you're able to play well with others in a real way. And so I agree that it is important to me that someone be passionate, but also be emotionally mature. So I'm actually thinking about some times where, I think, I feel like a lot of times in meetings and interviews, people understandably try to kind of present a version of themselves that is often a little bit, you're a little bit more on a lot of times in meetings, right? So it might be a bit of a heightened version of yourself. But sometimes I think a person's heightened version of themselves can be a little bit of I don't know if I want to be in a room with this energy all day, And so I can think of times when I've come out of meetings feeling that way, feeling like, and I, recognizing that I get that this might be a heightened version of you, but it might also just be you. And sometimes I consider myself to actually be pretty good at reading people. And sometimes I can tell, like, okay, I can tell that you're kind of doing the, like, I'm going to be on for this meeting. Sometimes I can feel that, but sometimes I feel like this seems like just you on a Tuesday. And if that's the case, like, I don't think I can do that. So I've come out of some meetings feeling that, where it's just, and that thing where a person, how most of us, you want to find that natural balance in a room. And there's such a thing as like leading from behind in a meeting, where I believe it's a good thing to try to go, I'm going to be in this meeting. There may be some things that I know I want to present about myself, right? Someone might ask you a question, you might answer that question, but you might also have in your mind, I want to make sure that these showrunners, know this about me, or I may want to share, that's all fine. But then there's that thing of people who just kind of don't have that awareness of just give and take, so things like that are the things that concern me, where I feel like, you know what I mean? When you feel like a person doesn't have an awareness of balance, of give and take, of when to stop talking, which I'm about to do now, meaning stop talking. But things like that are the things that concern me. Those are some of the things that I notice.
Thank you. Thank you. And my favorite quote is, that's you on a Tuesday. I'm sorry, Nichelle, go ahead. The biggest.
I think the biggest one for me is that you're not prepared for the meeting. It tells me everything about what you're going to be like in the room. If you're going to have the research, if you're going to, read the writer's notes to answer some of the questions that you might bring to the room instead, so if you've come to a meeting and you haven't read you haven't watched the show, or you haven't read the script, if you haven't read the book that it's based on. We had a meeting recently. My husband and I have have a production company, and we had a meeting recently for an assistant, and they hadn't watched Truth Be Told. That's fine. They hadn't watched Hip Hop Uncovered, which was the other show Malcolm did this year. They hadn't watched Falcon and Winter Soldier. And so I was desperate, and I was like, Good Wife, Justified, I'm going way back in the crates, Empire. Do you even know why you're here? And so that lack of preparation is a massive red flag for me.
Sure. Okay, so
on the other side of that, Carol, I did once have a meeting where a lower level writer came in with notes on my script. That also I didn't love.
Wow. It's like, I have some thoughts. I have some thoughts on what I feel like you could have handled a little bit better. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Maybe he was right, but just at the time I just like, oh boy.
Oh man.
Wow.
Okay. You loved him on the page, you loved him in the room, you loved him in the interview, they're in the room. What makes someone value added in the room? I think we all know about upper level. It's that they can help you. What about that first time or second time writer? What makes them value added in a room?
I think that it's a skill that you learn as you are in rooms and you get more experience. But the biggest one that you have to learn and makes you most helpful in the room is that you pitch solutions. If you're looking at the board and you absolutely know that's not working, it's not helpful to say, you know what, that piece of business in Act 3 doesn't work. And then you stop. You say, that piece of business in Act 3 doesn't work. And here's a way that I think if we're married to this, that it may work. If we step it out a little bit more, or here's an alternate pitch, because I think that this is going to give us problems going forward. So pitching solutions to problems and not just pitching the problem, not filibustering. That's a huge one for me, when you suck all the air up out of the room because you're going on and on and on, and being helpful and anticipating things. If you see that people are spinning around a subject and then they move on, if you came in the next day and said, hey, I looked into this last night and I think this is a piece of the research that I came in with that might help that story. So just being present and helpful and on top of things, and the no filibustering. That's a huge one for me.
Yeah. That's great. Dana, what makes somebody value added in the room for you?
I mean, I agree. Being someone who brings an energy that helps to be a problem solver, being a source of story, being a source of like, yeah, how to get us out of corners. I work in a lot, comedy and dramedy a lot, as well as drama. So being also just a source of like of positive energy and like and joy, like, so even though, which may sound abstract, but it's like, but being a story generator, and that can come in a lot of different ways. So yeah, as well as not being a story vampire and someone who's like sucking energy out, but like someone that is likely to be that person who can look at something in a different way. So that if you get in some kind of corner and get to where you're spinning your wheels, that person that is an outside the box thinker in a room, and particularly if they are kind of like a lower mid-level person, it's, they may not be, you're not looking to them to run the room and all that, but that person that is likely to maybe pitch something in a super outside the box way. And it may not be the fix that solves everything, but it may be the thing that kind of like loosens up the stuckness, and, and just has everyone like, well, that, makes everybody laugh because it's so ridiculous, or starts people in like that may not work, but like this could work, or, just starts everyone thinking in a different way. So just the outside the box thinkers, the people that tend to be story generators, and also people who are not afraid to just share this will probably shock you. I'm an oversharer in my rooms, and I appreciate people who are willing to be that as well. Again, from a place of fun and a place of, a good personal story about some mistakes that somebody's made is always just, again, a good way to generate some energy and some story, things like that.
Great. What makes a lower level writer value added in a room?
Well, I think there's an alchemy to every single room, and if I knew what the formula was to putting together the exact right group of people every time, I bottle it and sell it, but I don't know that. One thing that I've found, maybe this is coming from having grown up in creative writing workshops and playwriting workshops, is that the people who have had experience, if not necessarily in a writer's room, but in those workshop kind of settings, have tended to have a better sense of, I'm stealing this from a showrunner I worked for once, room hygiene, of what of how to work within the dynamic of the room as a whole. So building on someone else's idea, someone has an idea but isn't quite able to articulate it, helping that out, as opposed to bringing in your own idea or trying to monkey wrench something else into the into the conversation. If we're talking about this one thing right now, how can I help build on it? If the room is in need of some levity, then bring a little bit of levity into it. If it is if there's some bit of research that hasn't that we probably should have done and didn't do, you come in and it's like, I did a little bit of Googling last night. And being able to add in that respect. So there's many different kinds of times there might be a need. If there's, I don't know, I haven't been in this type of situation, but there's a conflict between two other writers and there's a palpable tension. Being able to diffuse that should not be the job of a lower level writer, but someone could also just make the day go a little bit nicer. That helps also. So there's a lot in reading the room that where one person could be helpful, and a lot of it, I think, comes from the experience of being in that kind of situation, and short of, I think, being in a workshop or group where you try to help other people with their own work or their own ideas. I don't know if there's a real way of learning that without being in it.
Sure. Thank you. Well, okay, so talking about being in the room, as a showrunner, how do you set the tone in your rooms so that diverse voices and points of view are heard and respected?
I just stated plain up top when we start the room and when I started in the hiring process. So part of the due diligence that I do is I call about a writer that I'm interested in, and everybody will make the call to the showrunner to say what were they like in the room, blah 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 blah. But the business is so, you know, small and everybody's wrapped around each other that I usually make a call to a writer who's just in the room, because I feel like rooms have different personalities. There's a personality when the showrunner's there, and then there's the personality of the room when the showrunner is gone. So the showrunner could definitely have an impression of a writer and how they function and work in a room that's different from what their colleagues who are there with them all day. So I usually get, you know, 1 or 2 references. And then in the, you know, our sit down meeting, I say it's very important that it's a respectful room, that people are adults. I don't like a lot of bullshit. I don't like politics. I don't like nastiness. And I feel like everybody should support one another. And then I ask the lower levels to kind of almost adopt the upper level to almost adopt a lower level, so that the lower levels have at least one person that they know that they could talk to if something's bothering them. And, you know, it on Good Wife, which was a very adult room, that was the format that I've carried forward. And it's like acknowledging someone else's pitches. If you interrupt, apologizing for it. And it's not where it's stiff, it's just basic manners. And I think that if I do it at the beginning, then everybody mimics it, and then it becomes the thing that we do in the room. It's just like, oh, I think that you had something to say, but you were interrupted. What was going on there? What's your thought? Blah, blah, blah. And calling people out by name, acknowledging something that they've said. And I swear after 2 days in the room and everyone sees, oh, this is going to be a respectful room. This is going to be a room where we support each other. They all fall in line and they love it. And it's been interesting to see the people who have, and I don't want to overuse this term, but the people who have sort of PTSD from bad rooms where they were abused or yelled at or had things thrown at them or they couldn't talk. And, you know, one of my writers season 1 said, how many questions do I get? And I said, what does that mean? And they were like, how many questions do I get before you get angry? And I'm like, that is so,
Wow.
I'm so sorry about whatever has happened to you in the past, but that doesn't exist here. And so I just think being respectful of other people is just the order of the day.
Yeah, that is great. That people want to be in your room. Alex, how do you set the tone?
I think it starts with who you hire. I think if I don't know, if someone is disrespectful in a room and shuts out other people's voices, I don't know, you know, it's kind of my fault for having hired that person. You know, I everything I can. I as someone who doesn't really enjoy conflict, I really do everything I can not to have people who are like that. Not to, you know, hire people who are like that. So I think I've been pretty lucky in that regard, that I haven't had to work for or alongside too many people who are like that. But I think that's kind of my job to not create that kind of situation. If I have inadvertently hired someone who causes that, I guess I would take them aside on a one-on-one situation and have a conversation. But luckily, I haven't had to.
Right. Dana, on day 1, is there something you say to your staff in the room, or how do you establish that tone so that all people are heard?
Just to echo some of what has been said, it does go along with that whole cliche about how so much of making a film or a TV series is about casting. Like, a huge part of your job is done when you hire the right people. A big part of it is done. And then, yes, alongside that, it is also about the tone you set in the beginning, as far as, you know, kind of what are I call it more like visions and values. Even for me, even in the languaging, some people might call it ground rules, or like, this is how we're going to do things. But even for me, in the languaging that I use around how are we going to, right? How are we going to play in this playground? So yes, I do, set a tone, but it's also, as Nichelle was saying, it's also the modeling of like, how do we treat each other in this room? So, and it's even more important while we're in a virtual medium, it's even more important. But, when we're in person as well, yeah, the idea of course, from whether, from a staff writer to a co-EP, everyone understanding that like, that everyone's got a right to be heard. Like the staff writer that is on, she's the story editor, the quote unquote lowest level writer in the room. Because even that, people understanding that like, in some rooms, people's titles matter much more than other rooms, all of that kind of thing. People understanding that like, if you have a pitch, pitch your pitch. And it's not, because there was a writer who was like, I was told that like, I wasn't supposed to talk because I'm a like people will go, like lower level writers will go to lunch with other writers and then have all these preconceived notions when they come in a room, so having to kind of, as the show was saying, people understanding like, oh, I'm in a safe space, that kind of thing. People understanding that you're in a safe space in this room. What you have to say is important in this room. I value, and everyone in this room values, your contribution. So it's about, what tone is being set with the actual ground rules and the actual visions and values of my particular room. And then what is modeled? Like, how do I say, actually, this person was starting to speak, so I want to hear the rest of what they have to say. Person who just interrupted them, actually, I want to hear what you have to say as well, but I want this person to finish what they were saying. So sometimes it's just the basic, like, and people get excited. Like some of it is not, like sometimes someone is not consciously trying to shut another person down. They're trying, sometimes people are just getting excited, but when you call attention to, I understand that you really wanted to pitch your thing, but you just cut somebody off and I want to hear that, sometimes when you just spend a few days actually, again, like setting the tone both in word and in action, and everybody's seeing like, oh, this is how we're going to do this. Yeah, then they do. Then everyone starts to do it, and it becomes like, oh, okay, this is how we're doing it in this room. So yeah, it really is. It is just kind of like stating that this is the way we're going to do it, and then continuing to do it in both word and action, and creating a safe space in the way that I speak and in the way that I create space for everyone. And then it becomes a what is it? There's a cool way to say it that I can't think of, but it continues to self-generating, I guess, you know what I mean? At a certain point, right? It does continue to everyone does fall in line with that. And it's such an energy that I think we all actually want to be in that energy, but more than in a toxic energy. But, it just is kind of, whatever the leadership does, that definitely perpetuates.
Sure. That is great. All of your rooms sound wonderful. But what if, in spite of you setting the tone, in spite of you modeling, in spite of you being awesome, there is some serious conflict in the room? How do you manage it? Anybody?
I think you just have to deal with it directly. I saw the potential for that on, I'm not going to name the show, but I saw the potential for that on a show, and I was not even an upper level, but I felt like I was an adult. And so I went took the person on a walk, and we just went out at the lunch break, and it seemed like, hey, you want to go for a walk? And I'm going over here, we could stretch our legs. And then after a bunch of chit chat, I said, hey, if you don't mind, here's something that I would love to tell you that I could see. And based on the expressions of some of the other people in the room, I think they're seeing it too. It's going to lead to this kind of trouble. And here's why it's important to you to kind of try and fix it. If you're performing for the showrunner so that they hire you or they promote you, you are discounting the 7 other people in the room who either are going to have shows of their own or go off in other rooms where people are looking for writers. So you're performing in this room at a level that's going to eliminate you from about 9 jobs. So you need to make a little bit of an attitude adjustment, understand what's going on. If you feel this kind of energy coming back, excuse yourself and go take a walk. But you need to dial it down because everyone's picking up on it. And these are, 9 people who are not going to hire you again. And so it was, I think, the idea of understanding that it wasn't just the showrunners that you're performing for, but all of your colleagues who will then go on to different shows. I think that penetrated that moment.
Great. Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Alex, you're conflict averse, but sometimes it finds you. How do you handle it?
Yeah, I try to de-escalate at all costs. So hopefully, avoid getting to that point. I generally, don't do anything by any means over text, or over email or over, anything I want to resolve face to face. Text messages sometimes get really heated. Emails sometimes, people will. I know one writer who's been fired multiple times, always because of an email sent in the heat of emotion. It just keeps happening again and again and again. He should know better by now. But if there's something, I much prefer to settle it face to face in a
Sure.
a one-on-one scenario and not
Yeah.
not throwing things around.
Dana, how about you?
I'm thinking it's been, fortunately, a while since I have had to, but I agree with like the de-escalation, the earlier, also that, that something can be intercepted and diffused. And like, I mean, I guess it depends on the type. Sometimes there are things in the room that were like a passionate disagreement about, I'm thinking about how there are different types. So, for me, like passionate disagreements about ideas, sometimes the sort of zooming out, and I want to talk about that for a minute, because I think those can sometimes be, kind of zooming out and making the point about how that doesn't have to get. I think there's a way to sort of de-escalate those in a way that can be, how that can sort of serve us, or how can we put this, whatever may be going on, to use in a way where it doesn't have to, because I've seen, as we all have, I'm sure, sometimes like, people can get really, really, and the whole room, not just like two people, but, rooms can get really passionate about story and pitches and invested in, all that stuff. And so those, I think, are a little bit easier, but it can be interesting trying to kind of do something with that energy and kind of like, how can we use this and all of that. So there's that, and where I think sometimes just kind of taking a step back and looking at like, if we're this passionate about this, how can we put it to use? And then as far as like personal ones, yeah, I think, being able to kind of look at what may be going on underneath it, and absolutely, like, I agree, talking to people face to face, talking to people one-on-one, and also just trying, I think many of us who end up in these positions, as we know, writing is one skill set. People management is a whole other skill set that some people have, right? Naturally more than others. Some people have learned more than others about it. And so I think it's, being able to employ a little bit of our own psychology when possible, in terms of understanding, hopefully, what may be going on underneath those conflicts, and being able to put, when possible, use a little bit of that, like being able to see, like, is there something going on behind whatever, because usually, of course, those things are more than just about whatever is on the surface. So being able to, when possible, again, have those conversations and hope and recognize that if people are going to stay, when is something worth having a conversation about, and when is it worth making a larger change? So I try to, for me, it's checking in with myself about what's the most useful thing. Is it the most useful to go, okay, this seems like, again, something that's worth me in some way intervening, having conversations, blah, 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 like understanding, what do I want out of this scenario? Do I want to resolve this because I think this is, what I mean? So that's, to me, the step one. What do I want to get? What's my goal? And then going into, am I intervening? Am I going, this has happened so much that somebody needs to be removed from this scenario? So understanding what I want first, and then addressing from there.
That makes perfect sense. We could talk about this a lot longer, but it's time for questions now. So let me get to the first question. And anybody can answer this. Any suggestions on how to break through the gatekeepers and get to the person with the hiring power? Everybody wants to know that.
And by
there's no
gatekeepers yeah, I think that they're talking about agents and, the producers that might read them so that they could get to the showrunners. It's tough. I had those relationships because I started out as an assistant in this business. While I was working as a freelance writer, I was also working as an assistant at William Morris. So the other assistants who either then became agents or went off to be execs, or they went off to be writers, they almost became a pledge class, for lack of a better word, and then joining different writers groups, and then meeting people that had the same goals, and those friendships ended up being the calling cards for some places, because I know that my manager or agents will read something if it's coming from another client. And I came to town not knowing anyone here, so that seems impossible if you're living somewhere else and you're thinking how you could crash in. But it's those relationships, those writers groups, those writing classes that you're taking, your professors. You might be surprised by how many crossover relationships you have that could be that one thing that gets you in the door. The contest also, and then befriending other assistants who do have their boss's ear. And I think that's helpful. So I've taken recommendations from, some of the lower levels and from different assistants who say, I think that you would like this person's writing. Would you like to take a look? So it's relationships at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Let me get to the next
programs.
question. Oh, and definitely,
And the programs.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Mm-hmm. That is a way that you can get in. And almost every network studio has a writing program, and a shout out to my program, the CBS Diversity Writers Mentoring Program. But let me get to the next question, which is really piggybacking on the previous one. Are you only reading scripts that come from agents and managers? I think, Nichelle, you may have answered that, but Dana or Alex, are you reading only scripts that are coming from agents and managers?
For the most part, unless as Nichelle alluded to, there has to be some really direct kind of relationship that would lead to that exception. So like, friend of a friend, there has to, unless there's some specific relationship that it would make an exemption.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
This kind of points to what Nichelle said. I think befriending the gatekeepers is not the worst thing in the world. Because it's not, at least in my case, it's not such a totalitarian regime that I make all decisions unilaterally. It's a whole team of producers and executives and fellow writers. So if my assistant comes to me and says, you got to read this, I take it very, very seriously. Or if an executive or at the studio or at the network says, this is really worth reading, I take it very, very seriously. The same way that if I get enthusiastic about something and the person says, are you really sure? I take that seriously too. So they're not there just to keep people out. I think if you have a connection and in terms of, if you want to, I don't think it's a good idea to try to go around that by, I don't know, like, following me on Twitter or something, because that's not, you haven't a friend that way. That isn't, and I mostly tweet about food, so it's not going to be that helpful. I think not thinking of the gatekeepers as people to keep you out, but people who really can advocate for you is I think a better way to look at it.
That is great. And this question I get all the time, and I'd love each of you to answer this. I have an opportunity to pitch a project to a studio, and beforehand, I would like to partner with an established writer showrunner beforehand. Who wouldn't? What's the best approach to contact a showrunner for mentorship and partnership? How do people get to you if they have a project? Are you interested in other people's projects? Are you only interested in your own? How would somebody get to you?
Well, Malcolm and I have a production company, the 51, and we have our deal at HBO, and that's a producing deal. That's not a writing deal. That's for us as producers. And so, yes, in that way, we don't take things blind. It goes in through our managers and agents. But we are interested in producing other writers, and we've hired almost our entire careers aspiring writers to work with us. So it's, they start out as assistants, and then the young man who was our assistant 6 years ago then became the writer's assistant on a project of Malcolm's, then the staff writer on first year of Truth Be Told. And then he went on and became a executive story editor on Falcon and Winter Soldier. And then he came back to Truth Be Told. So we do a lot of homegrown talent. Like we hire people who are helping us, and so that we could help them. So every assistant that we've ever had works for us in some capacity, or we've helped them get staffed on other shows or pursue whatever their dream is. So we started out that way. So that's why we're very conscious of that growth from, showing up in this town with no connections and trying to make it. So it's important to us. And, Malcolm does more than I do. I'm a little bit more of a private person than him, but he's constantly doing, things for the Guild or different speaking engagements. And we met, the woman that came once to do my nails, I loved her immediately. She used to work in the business, and she got laid off and never could get her foot back in. And so we hired her at the 51, and she's invaluable. She's been with us for about 2 years now.
Wow. Okay, so the answer there is contact the 51. Just kidding. Okay. How do people, if they have a project and they want you to be the showrunner on it, how do they get to you?
It's not a facetious answer to contact the 51. I think if there are not every showrunner is, you can't just find any showrunner. There are people who are going to be, as we learned from the showrunner training program, there are showrunners who want to create their own work, who want to put their own stamp onto it, who may take your idea away from you. If the real idea is to have someone to sort of help you along and guide you down that path, it is someone who is more like a mentor than someone who has their own creative vision. So that requires finding a very specific kind of showrunner, and not just any showrunner. And that's where I think your representation can help. If you don't have representation, I think that's a different story. That's about getting representation is another question of how to answer it.
Another panel.
Yeah, it's another panel.
It is.
But you can't still find any old showrunner, because any old showrunner might have a completely different agenda than what you want for it.
Right. Dana, what can you add to that, or would you add?
Yeah, I'm thinking about what I can add that's valuable. I also have a company, Loud Sis Productions, that, as I mentioned earlier, my deal is at Sony, and the vision for Loud Sis is that we tell stories that are centered on people of color, underdogs, women's voices. I do have a more specific vision. It kind of goes to what Alex is talking about. Mine is a writer and producer driven company. It is a combination of stories that I'm passionate about telling, as well as we do also produce and oversee and supervise writers. But for me, I have a hell yes mantra about the stories that I tell. So it has to be a hell yes for me. It doesn't mean that I'm necessarily always writing it, but it has to be a hell yes that it aligns with the visions of Loud Sis. So that may or may not be, everything that comes in the door, right? Everything that, people approach us with. But you can absolutely, I'm not that hard to find at loudsis.com and at all the various ways that people can find us. But that's the thing. It's just the question of whether or not the story someone wants to tell falls in a hell yes alignment with me and the vision of Loud Sis. So it goes back to what Alex said. It's like we all have stories that we want to tell, and it is about finding creative alignment with a showrunner, with mentors. We mentor a lot of people. We don't necessarily produce the work of everyone we mentor. So it's that type of, it's finding creative alignment.
Great. That's great. And I love how generous and open everyone is being here. Okay. Just as a matter of information, at what point in the process of a television series are you hiring writers? During the development stage, as soon as you get a pickup, before you get a pickup, anybody?
We started reading before the pickup. Yeah. we started reading and hiring and meeting with writers before the pickup, because we were starting initially the first season. We were just going to do a room to break the season, and then I would go off and write 1 and 2, and then Apple would make the decision. Because of, convoluted circumstances, that room ended up being a go room. So I had those group of people and I added to it. So each time before you start, once you start getting that feeling that it might be a go, we're reading at that point.
Great. Dana, how about you?
It depends on the project. We had a series order for Best Man, for example. So we were, pretty much once we had all the things we needed as far as cast commitments and all that, we were, reading pretty much right away. But yeah, I mean, in general, I think it is, you are usually trying to kind of get ahead of that process as much as possible. So I do generally believe in, once you have kind of the good indication, trying to read before a pickup is just a good idea. Just so that you're not always drowning under a pile of scripts.
Sure. Alex, anything to add to that?
Agreed. The only thing I'd add is that I wouldn't take a meeting until after a pickup, because you don't want to get into a meeting with a writer and then be like, oh, actually, we didn't get picked up. Sorry about that.
That'd be terrible. Okay. We're almost out of time. I'd like to ask each of you to answer this question. What's your biggest challenge as a showrunner? What's your biggest reward as a showrunner? Whoever would like to start. But do it, because we're running out of time.
The biggest challenge is, and it was a little overwhelming, was all the personality management. And I don't mean negative personality management. I don't think that I'm waiting in there and breaking up fistfights or anything like that. I think it's the, managing up, make sure all the executives feel tucked in the studio and network, and then taking the temperature on all of your writers. That I found was a little bit more overwhelming than I thought it was going to be. And the biggest reward is just those moments where someone gets hired, whether it's the casting person, a department head, or one of the writers, and you could tell it made them happy. And there's just nothing like that. One of the actors who I love, she was like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent. And then she ended up getting cast on the show. And I still have that letter that she wrote about it. It just was so touching. So those kind of things that are not on screen are where the answers are for me.
Thanks. Dana, briefly, biggest challenge, biggest reward.
It's easy. For me, the biggest challenge is always the clock. It's just always the clock for me. And then reward is just getting to, the magic of telling stories and playing in this world. It never gets old to me. All of the elements of playing and being able to make up stories and be a storyteller.
Great. Alex, take us home. Biggest challenge, biggest reward.
The biggest challenge is that you are ultimately responsible for fucking everything, and there's kind of no to it, and you have to make some decisions about when do I just what do I put off, what do I have to handle now, what do I delegate to someone else, and when do I go back to my family. The greatest reward, on the last show, we were able to have over 180 people who worked on the show whose relatives were part of the internment, and they finally got to see their story told. That's hugely rewarding.
Yes. Well, that is all the time we have. This was a wonderful panel. Thank you so much. And Dana, back to you.
Thank you so very much, Carol, and to all of our panelists, guest speakers over the past 2 days. These have been a dynamic 2 days. And though I'm on this side of the camera, and I've learned so much just about the business as a whole, about strategy, about leaning in and storytelling. It's just been absolutely wonderful. There are just so many insightful questions and answers and comments. And for each and every one of you out there, we will start to post clips and some of the panels from the past 2 days on the Walter Cates website. So keep your eyes peeled for that, as well as please follow us on social media for more updates, as well as additional social clips and opportunities there. We will see you in Los Angeles, April 2022 at the London Hotel. We will be back in real life, able to connect, hug, laugh in person, and of course, cheers, because I'm sure that many of you are going to leverage the things you learned the past 2 days to do some really awesome things. And now, for those of you who are registered for the networking event, It is now time to log off. I know you're going to miss my face. Take a coffee or water break and then click onto your separate Zoom link for the networking event that's going to start to take place. And if I look at my clock, in just a few minutes. So wherever you may be, thank you so very much. Have a beautiful day, evening, afternoon, and we will see you again very shortly. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
We all have a story to tell. Beautiful, complex, fascinating stories. Told through a lens of varying shades and experiences. That's the power of art imitating life. It cannot be defined or confined to one space. So let your creativity soar. Fill the page, press record, and dare to captivate the masses with your authentic voice. We all have a story to tell. What's yours?